Good evening. The August 8th, 2023 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education is called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Please place your mobile phones on silent mode for the meeting. Mr. Wade, please call the roll.
Ms. Briner.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Jessling.
Present.
Ms. Payne.
Here.
Mr. Tuttle.
Here. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to welcome everyone to the August 8th regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval via the district's paperless Board of Education agenda system, Board Docs. The public can access the agenda through the school district's website. The agenda is available through the district's website for public viewing this Sunday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and chief financial officer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. There are two places on the agenda when the board entertains comments from the community. The first hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on agenda items only. The second hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on any subject, whether it is on an item on the agenda or another issue. To participate in the hearing of the public section, interested speakers must sign prior to the start of the meeting. Sign-ups were made available online through the school district website or on-site prior to 5 p.m. When it is your turn to speak, you will be called to the microphone. When addressing the board, please state your name and address questions to the board president. Each person may speak only once per segment, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. The purpose of the hearing of the public is for the community members to address the board. The board continues to welcome feedback from the community as an important component to conducting business. This is an information gathering opportunity for the board and administration so we can work to best serve our community. If at the end of the public participation we do not make a statement, please know that no way does that demonstrate a lack of care for comments shared by our community. Rather, we want to be thoughtful in our approach, and we will provide a response in a timely manner when appropriate. This meeting is being televised live and on delayed basis and will be shown on Spectrum Cable Channel 1026 in Mentor and Channel 1025 in Mentor on the Lake. This meeting is also being recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel, Cardinal TV, Mentor, Ohio. Thank you. At this time, we have district highlights and recognition. Mr. Heath.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade. This evening, we are pleased to recognize several staff members who are being honored for their commitment to their schools and their students. We will begin with our Excellence in Teaching Award winners. Mrs. Burnett, will you please join me at the podium? This award recognizes certified staff members who demonstrate exemplary qualities in their profession and are involved in activities which reflect professional commitment. This evening's recipient represents the best at Mentor Schools. It is our pleasure to honor the winners of the 2023 Excellence in Teaching Award. Jennifer Berger, first grade, teacher at Fairfax Elementary. Melanie Stanek, first grade teacher at Ridge Elementary. Grade teacher at Memorial. And Jordan Wilcox, conditioning and PE teacher at Mentor High School. Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, at this time we will be recognizing certified and classified groups for their excellence in team collaboration. To be selected for this award, the team members must demonstrate enthusiasm for their responsibilities and a strong commitment to the school system. The teams must also be respected by colleagues, parents, and students, and demonstrate strong collaborative skills. Our Certified Excellence in Team Collaboration Award this year goes to the music department at Mentor High School. Would the following teachers please report to the podium? Kim Driscoll, Adam Landry, Ben McMurtry, Steve Paremba, and Matt Yoke. Our second group is the third grade team from Orchard Hollow. Would Jen Sanford, Melissa Gibson, and Chelsea Sadlick please report to the podium? Our Classified Excellence in Team Collaboration Award goes to our IT department. Would Tim Baker, Todd Bauer, Doug Estes, Tracy Gibson, Joe Hernan, Jan Orlando, and Joanne Cevedos please report to the podium? Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, nominations are also collected every year for the Outstanding Service Award. To be selected for this award, a nominee must demonstrate enthusiasm for his or her responsibilities, a commitment to mentor schools, and have the respect of their colleagues, parents, and students. The winners selected this year fit that criteria perfectly. It is our pleasure to honor the winners of the 2023 Outstanding Service Award. Our first recipients are the Mentor High School main office secretaries, Paula Coughlin and Ann McGrath. Our second group is the Ridge Elementary Office team, Danielle DeDante, Michelle Del Santer, and Tracy Zwegerman. Would you please report to the podium? Our next recipients are the Service Building Business Operations Secretaries, Fern Mance and Denise Patterson. Our vehicle technicians, Randy Horvath, John Pancava, Tom Schmitz and Carmen Zanella. Please report to the podium.
How are you? Congratulations.
And finally, our Classified Outstanding Service Award winners, Chuck Henry, custodian at Lake Elementary. Sue Kidd, secretary at Lake Elementary. Kimberly Kotze, custodian at Mentor High School. Bridget McLaughlin, secretary at Memorial Middle School. Mike Sporky, district-wide maintenance. And Vicki Selecki, classroom assistant at Bellflower Elementary. All right, everybody smile for a picture now.
Oh, that's it, you're done? What are these?
They're not here.
Congratulations to all of our award winners this year. Thank you, guys. Just want to give everybody a couple of quick updates here on some items before we jump into the rest of the meeting here this evening. First, the board policy manual that we have posted for public view remains the one that was presented at the board work session that we had on July 17th for the first reading of the policies. There were updates that our board members made at the table that evening that have been made in our draft policy manual that our board members can see in their board docs access. If we would have posted a new document with the updates and made that active for public view, the way it would have appeared was that as if that were the final approved policy manual. So we apologize if that caused some confusion, but that was the way we had to approach it through our board doc system. Mr. Wade and I actually talked about how we might approach this from our board policy updates here in the future, and we've got a couple things worked out that we will try and make sure that all of those policies that we update periodically throughout the year now, once we have a final manual in place, will be viewable to the public prior to that meeting. Second, due to the nature of tonight's agenda on board policy, we want to let everyone know that the topic of sexually explicit language will be part of that discussion. And finally, I want to thank our board members again for all of the hard work that they have put into going through the major project of transitioning our board policies to the Neola manual. We identified early on in my first year that our policies had gaps, were outdated, and sometimes contained contradictory language. So this was a necessary task to make sure that we had a manual that covered us with all of the legal updates on a regular basis. Our board members are obviously very active in their roles in this district and take their responsibilities seriously every single day. With this task, it was no different. We've spent countless hours on the phone, in meetings, and individually reviewing all of these policies. We have utilized our Neola representatives and our legal counsel on numerous occasions to review some of the options available to us to make sure we had a manual that everybody can be comfortable with as we enter this school year. I'm so grateful to all 5 of you for your painstaking efforts in pulling this manual together. Thank you. At this time, we will take a short break to allow our award recipients to leave before we jump into the rest of our business meeting. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, approval of the minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved?
Second?
Comments and corrections? Hearing none. Mr. Wade, please call a roll.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next on the agenda, hearing of the public.
I'm going to call 2 speakers up at a time. Our first speaker is Laura Dillon from Hayes Boulevard. She's a resident in the district, and we also have Sage McMillan from Danbury Court, who's a parent guardian in the district.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Laura Dillon. I live at 7177 Hayes Boulevard. There should never be a reason for sexually explicit material to be available to minors in our schools. I have lived in Mentor for 40 years and raised my children through the Mentor public schools. I have always voted yes for the levies. Not now. I will vote no on all future levies until sexually explicit material and education is stopped in the schools to minor children. Also, as a taxpayer, who is funding this sexually explicit material? There are quite a few Mentor residents who have already raised our children through this school system, and we believe in basic education. If you won't listen to us now, then we will speak with our voices in November and vote no on the levies and vote no on which school board members are allowing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next 2 speakers, Lauren Breslin from Galloway Court, parent, resident of the district, and Jacqueline McCormick from Ridgeview Trail, resident of the district.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Breslin, and I live on Galloway Court in Mentor. Our family typically makes brownies every weekend. I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of Americans love brownies. They are a very popular dessert, a dessert that would be highly valued. However, what if a teacher added dog feces into the ingredients? Should we eat this brownie? Should we serve it to our friends? Of course not, because even a spoonful of dog poop would ruin the entire batch of brownies. This analogy is similar to a good book, one that everyone with common sense and moral decency would agree had literary value. If you add even just a little bit of porn, just a little bit of sex, just a little bit of pedophilia, the whole book and its literary value is nullified. I assert that any type of sexually explicit material nullifies the literary value of any book. So let's begin first with the effects of eating dog poop. Dog poop compared to pornography is relatively harmless. Do you know what happens when someone ingests dog poop? Really nothing, it's gross. According to Medical News Today, you could contract viruses, bacteria, or parasites. You may need to take medication, all unpleasant, but you will recover. However, sexually explicit images and pornography stay in our imaginations for the rest of our lives. According to a 2016 article in the American College of Pediatrics, a summary of studies found the following effects of pornography on young people are as follows. 1, males demonstrated increased callousness toward women. 2, students considered the crime of rape less serious. 3, students were more accepting of non-marital sexual activity, oral sex, and anal sex. 4, students became more interested in more extreme and deviant forms of pornography. 5, students were more accepting of sexual infidelity in a relationship. 6, students valued marriage less and were twice as likely to believe marriage may become obsolete. 7, males experienced a decreased desire for children, and females experienced a decreased desire to have a daughter. 8, all students showed a greater acceptance of female promiscuity. Is this really what the school board is discussing and debating tonight? Can we not search out other worthwhile, meaningful, uplifting literature for our students? Again, as a parent to a young child and 3 teenagers, I argue that books need to be vetted and removed from circulation. There is absolutely zero justification for including sexually explicit materials in their readings or assignments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacqueline McCormick. The fact that I am even having to stand here and speak today and fight in support of a policy that would help protect our children's innocence and protect them from having trusted adults provide them with sexually explicit graphic materials is just asinine. I was appalled at the last special meeting. Maggie Cook, a current Chardon school teacher, and Mary Briner wanted to keep the right to pander obscenities to minor children as long as the literacy, artistic, or scientific value outweighs the sexually explicit content. This is absolutely insane. The definition of the policy proposal is very specific. I'd like to know which one of the terms are you okay with showing graphically in detail to minors? Is it fellatio, bestiality, molestation, or maybe it's pedophilia? Ginny surprisingly agreed with Tom and Annie at the last special meeting and stated she supported the sexually explicit portion of the policy as long as the sexually content portion was added. This was completed, so I sure hope that, Ginny, you haven't switched your opinion on the issue. That would not be very transparent. I know several teachers were disappointed in your original support of the book, The Bluest Eye. To remind you all of the explicit materials we were talking about, an excerpt from the book talking about a father molesting his daughter is as follows, and I quote, "A bolt of desire ran down his genitals, giving it length and softening the lips of his anus. He wanted to fuck her," end quote. This is sick. And many pages of this book are filled with this smut. This is the graphic detail we're talking about. As adults, we should never pander obscenities to minors. You may have heard about a previous long-term Mentor English teacher, Andrew Sabo, who was just arrested for 9 counts of pandering sexual-oriented materials to minors. In fact, I know that the Mentor School Board has a current complaint filed against them with the Mentor Police Department for doing just that, due to several books being explicit and given access to minors. I will tell you that we have parents and community members ready to file additional complaints at the Mentor Police Department if this policy as written doesn't pass. We are awaiting your action or inaction on this policy to see what you decide. Your decisions have a direct impact on the future success or failure of the November levies. It is not enough to give parents notification that their children may be exposed to sexually graphic materials. That's why there is an Ohio code against pandering obscenities to minors. We do not want our children's minds infiltrated with filth, and we will not support your pandering obscenities to minors anymore on our tax dollars. We've already made the news both locally and nationally recently for many things, from allowing boys and girls bathrooms and locker rooms, allowing children to transition and use different names and pronouns without their parents being notified, and using tax dollars to purchase teacher trainings that lean heavily left. I don't think you want to add another one to this list, especially when you are asking for the public to support your levies. Do the right thing for once, help regain some trust from the community, and support the policy as written. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next 2 speakers are Rachel Perry from Maple Street, who's a resident in the district, and Michael Williams from Walden Court, who's also a resident district. Rachel Perry and Michael Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. I didn't hear my name again. I apologize for that. That's so embarrassing. Good evening, President Tuttle. It is very nice to see you again. It's always nice to see you. I've been coming to these meetings since March, and I've been coming here seeing people that live in my neighborhood speak to you with such disdain, with just this little bit of sting in their voice when they say your name. It feels like they are making fun of you. It feels like they are talking down to you. And I want to apologize on the behalf of my community for that, okay? I'm not trying to say anything about anyone else. I would like to point out that right now I'm having a hard time concentrating because I hear whispering coming from behind me, okay? That is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing people talking when I am supposed to be speaking when I am exercising my First Amendment rights. They can do that. Anyone here in this room can do that. It's not gonna bother me because I know that my government will never do anything to silence me because that is my constitutional right. I would like to just briefly talk about 2 policies. One, it's just about school bus policy. I'll try to be as brief as possible. We all know that Memorial closed last year, I think in the spring, because they didn't have enough buses. I think people were mad about it, but I think the board listened to people that were mad about that. Because right now, I am saying this off the top of my head, and I had a traumatic brain injury 6 years ago, so my memory is just not what it used to be. Okay. I think you were attempting to hire 50 full-time school busers. Is that right? Maybe. And that so far, maybe you've already hired 48. So that tells me that you're working, and that also 6 out of the 10 school bus, positions that are just for subs, 6 out of those have been filled. But one thing I did notice is that, or heard or listened, I'm learning, I don't know anything about it, is that on the same day that Memorial closed down, the school bus system still got all the kids going to private school, to school that day. And as a public school kid who took the bus until my senior year, I didn't even own a car. I'm just trying to put some perspective here and say, please don't forget about the public school kids. And don't forget about the public school kids while they're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we take the next speaker, Mr. Tuttle, could you please ask the audience to be respectful so that we can hear Mr. Wade and so that we can keep the meeting going?
Well, I think you brought the point forward, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mary. Mrs. Briner. Next. Michael.
Dear Mr. Tuttle, Mr. Wade, Mr. Heath, and school board members, I stand here tonight to fully support policy proposal number 2520.03 as written to limit sexually explicit and any sexual content in Mentor schools to our minor children through sexually graphic books, pictures, videos, drawings, or depictions. This policy is very well thought out, and the language is well written and very clear. It will protect our minor children from harmful sexualized materials. You may argue, and you have argued, that the literary value could outweigh the sexual content in some of these materials. I repudiate this argument and ask you if any literary value can be so valuable as to risk polluting the minds of our minor children with sexually explicit content that could negatively impact them for the rest of their lives. The only question is, what will you do about it? I ask you to send a clear message to the authors of sexually explicit books and materials, to their publishers, and to any purveyors of sexualized materials that we will not allow it here for our minor students. Will you stand up and set a precedent in the Mentor School District that you will protect our children from immorality, smut, and pornography? Will you stand up and set a precedent in our surrounding school districts? Will you stand up and set a precedent for the rest of Ohio school districts? And will you stand up and set a precedent for the rest of this nation? I hope and pray that you do the right and moral thing here and vote to accept this policy as written. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tuttle.
Our next speaker is Susan Sednick from Little Mountain. She's a resident in the district. And then we have Gil Martello from Camelot, who's a resident in the district and also parent.
Hello, my name is Susan, and like you said, I live on Little Mountain Road. I'm a parent here and a citizen in the district. I'm here to, I just want to give my thoughts about the option 1 that Annie Payne put forth regarding sexually explicit material. And I just wanted to point out that the board's mission statement says that they aim to provide a safe learning environment and provide a high-quality education. And I think if you adopt option 1, then you'll actually be following the mission statement that you have. Our students deserve to have a safe place to learn while having the best books and materials. It is absolutely absurd to think that literary or artistic components of a book would somehow outweigh the disturbing and harmful effects of reading sexually explicit and pornographic materials. Not only is that illegal, it's morally abhorrent. Pediatricians, social workers, therapists, and plenty of other people with plain common sense know that sexually explicit and pornographic material harms children in many ways, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I'm very disturbed and disappointed that we actually have people on our board, women, who are mothers or grandmothers, aunts, sisters, that actually think that porn for kids is not a big deal. That's really troubling. And it's not that you just think that it's not a big deal, you actively work hard to get it to our kids, and you actively work hard to defend that it's there. If it's a book that you feel is so worthwhile, there's no reason that you can't send an email to the parents and say, Mrs. Smith, I believe that here's a list of smutty, horrible books I think your kids should read. I think that's important. Do it on your own time. Certainly do that. But you have no right to have that material in the school for minor children to access. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request. We're just asking you to do the right thing. There's no harm in keeping those books from children and letting the parents say, hey, you want to read it? Go for it. But it shouldn't be at school. I just also want to say a quick recommendation to parents out there. It's a terrible shame that we actually have to have a conversation. It should be real obvious what we should do, but because we're having this conversation, I would suggest all parents bring your kids home. It's safer. You can see from what's going on here that our public schools are not a safe place. And so I would say bring them home. And I also say thank you to Annie Payne, who works so hard on this option 1 and always fights for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gil Martello, 6880 South Camelot. Good evening, Mr. Tuttle, Mr. Heath, Mr. Wade, and members of the board. The past few months I have watched with considerable disappointment at what I consider to be an egregious abuse of taxpayer resources. The ongoing debate of what obscene material is, who can view it, and under what circumstances is embarrassing. Obscene, divisive, hateful materials have no place in our schools. After months in debate, the value of these materials as it relates to the benefit of our children's educational experience goes unexplained. In my opinion, that's because there is no value. Speaking to the subject of value, this board has voted to place 2 levies on the ballot this fall. If these levies were to fail, it might be because the taxpayers of this community see this exercise and others like it as a complete waste of resources. Our focus should return to raising the faltering standardized test scores and more adequately preparing today's youth for the globally competitive marketplace. I'm going to pause for just a second. I had the privilege of hiring about 50 people where I work. I can tell you the students of Mentor are not prepared. They can't fill out a job application properly. I'll resume. I ask you, Mr. Tuttle and members of the board, stop trying to twist the semantics of the argument to find the middle ground. There is no middle ground here. Obscene materials do not belong in our schools. The policy, in my opinion, of the Mentor City Schools should be as follows. Under no circumstances shall a Mentor City School distribute or make available to the students thereof obscene materials as defined by the Ohio Revised Code, section 2907.321. It is really that simple. I am now respectfully asking you all to start showing the taxpayers this board is capable of making swift, timely, and proper decisions based on common sense. I am not capitulating to the whims and tyranny of a few. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next two speakers are Kim Bazan from Marjorie Drive, who's a resident in the district, also parent guardian, and then Roger Jewell from Hart Street, who's a resident and parent in the district.
Good evening, everyone. When news broke that former English teacher from Menor High School was recently arrested for pandering sexual-oriented material, masturbation, bestiality, 5 counts, pandering sexual orientation material, create, 4 counts, pandering sexual-oriented material, create, produce, publish, pandering sexual-oriented material, minor, sell, makes you wonder why it's so hard for some parents in the audience and some of the board members to understand why parents like myself are fighting so hard for the policies such as 2520.03 to pass with no amendments or adjustments made to it. Why is it so hard for the community members with children in the schools to have such a problem with tax-paying parents who homeschool their children to avoid situations such as the recent arrest of that former high school teacher and explicit sexual materials being at the hands of minors? We need to do better in the Menor schools and stick to the basics by providing wholesome, traditional, academically favored curriculum based on core subjects that don't push politics, woke agendas, or sexually explicit materials. Keep the children of our community safe. Provide them with academically challenged materials that will keep test scores up, vet out sexually explicit books that take minors' innocence away, and spend tax dollars wisely. Then maybe, just maybe, you will see a levy pass in November, especially from even homeschool parents such as myself. My question to all of you in favor of this nonsense: why are you pushing so hard to have this kind of material in your schools? You need to start trusting the parents who show up at these board meetings, who are fighting and wanting to fight to protect these children, their innocence, and understand that we are truly the ones who want what's best for them, safety for their minds, and not be filled with the filth and garbage. My hope and prayer is to be listened, and that my message is loud and clear and received. And my hopes are that it touches your hearts and not have hate in your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Wade, Mr. Tuttle, Mr. Heath, school board members. Here we are again. It's August. I'd like to know if the bluest eye is still in the library. That's a question you can answer. It's August. We were told that you were going to meet with the board or whomever is making these decisions to put these books in the library, and we were going to get them removed. Is that going to happen? I guess we're not answering. Folks, you just gave, Mr. Heath, you just gave a warning about graphic detail of books being discussed in a meeting with all adults. Some meetings are shut down when people try to read that stuff. But it's okay to put it in a classroom. I'm standing here today telling you, looking you in the eye from 25 yards, it is not acceptable for that book to be in any library that has students going into it.
Roger,
No,
excuse me one
Yep.
moment. Speak to me now.
I'm
Speak to me.
speaking to all of you.
All right.
It's Mr.
Not
Tuttle.
to Mr. Heath.
Mr. Tuttle, is that book still in the library?
We'll get you the answer.
Mr. Heath said it was going to be removed by August. It's August, and that book is still there, isn't it? Are we still doing pronoun surveys? That's got to stop. Are we still allowing boys in girls' bathrooms and vice versa? This stuff has got to stop. Menor's too good for this. Too good for this, and it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. How many times do we have to come here and make these pleas before somebody's going to listen? I'm not going to threaten you with a levy. I'm not going to threaten you with anything. These are kids that you guys are intentionally damaging. You're a teacher. You're damaging these kids for the rest of their lives. I'm asking you to stay in your lane and teach these kids so they can fill out an application on a job interview. So they can add, so they can subtract, so they know a little bit about history. My wife and I will take care of our child. We've raised 6 of them. We've done a pretty good job. We'll decide when our daughter gets taught sex education. You will not. You will not. And in love and in all the mercy and grace that I can muster, I offer you this. Luke 17:1. Jesus said to his disciples, "Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe unto anyone through whom they come." Woe unto anyone through whom they come. I don't know if we understand the size of the problem that we're creating here. Those books need to go, and we need some answers. We also need a superintendent that will talk to us.
Thank you.
Our next 2 speakers are Rose Iapolo from Judges Court, resident, parent, and employee, and Linda O'Brien from Tanager Court, resident.
Hello? Wait, I'm going to have to do the granny style so I can see you and my paper. I'm speaking regarding the sexually explicit policy that was originally presented by Mrs. Payne and Mr. Tuttle, urging you to vote it as is. I feel that you are hijacking this policy because you feel that there can be educational benefits to explicit material. What are those benefits? I haven't heard one single example from any of you in the last 3 months. You've had more than enough time to find one example, one book, one school in this country that has come across where that explicit material actually benefited the students. I can only assume that anyone up there opposing this would have at least one example. I haven't found any legitimate studies or articles that list the benefits of exposure to this stuff. There are, however, many studies conducted that prove exposure to this material is harmful, especially to girls. Damage to self-esteem, anxiety, eating disorders, depression, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts. The district uses tax dollars to pay this book review committee to review sexually explicit challenges. Every time a book is challenged, it costs the district money. What a complete, utter waste of time and resources when the definition of explicit is so black and white. This policy, as written by Annie and Tom, would greatly reduce the need for books to be challenged. It's hard enough to keep our kids away from explicit content. Kids have it at their fingertips everywhere. Why not let school be a safe and stress-free place for students? Why not let parents know that when their kids are in the building, they are being protected? It's a sad realization, but all districts have a percentage of students who are victims of abuse. Are you comfortable providing explicit content about rape and molestation to a student who may be a victim of rape or molestation? This could set a victim's recovery back years. For what? For those who need to call this policy book banning, I ask you this. The schools place internet blocks on students' devices to prevent them from accessing certain apps and websites while on the building's Wi-Fi. Does this mean the school is banning websites? No, they are simply creating a way to protect them from accessing mature material and to avoid distractions. The district limits the block to school property. Kids are free to go on whatever sites they want once they leave. This is because the child is no longer the responsibility of the district, but to the parents. If parents want their kids to access YouTube videos and believe that is educational, then they are free to do so outside of school. The argument that kids need this exposure in school is debunked by your own internet policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Linda O'Brien here from Tanager Court. You know, when I moved here 3 years ago, I never in my wildest imagination could have anticipated that I would be standing here tonight having to help define what pornography is to a group that is supposed to be educated professionals. It takes me back to a time that on TV I saw an elected individual saying, "What is sex exactly?" And then it eroded into further into saying, well, what is the word is? That's the degree of absurdity that this requirement consists of. But I thought that after listening to Ms. Jesling's support for the bluest eye, that maybe we did need to get so elementary as to define this basic concept. So I looked it up. And for all of you, here's what it says. It is printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or sexual activity intended to stimulate erotic feelings. That's what it says. I don't think that's complex. A Common Core math is more complex than this. So we all know that pornography is creating a moral crisis in this country. And it's having a corrosion and a terrible negative influence on people of all ages. Why are we allowing it to start at the beginning? This is not about literary value. There is no literary value regardless of what some of you believe. Pornography is bad. You don't take black and try to make it gray by adding a little bit of white. No, it's either white or it's black. And in this case, it is pure black as pornography. And we have to get it out of our schools. And in case you need some extra help, the U.S. Code 1470 says that it is illegal to knowingly distribute pornography to minors. And then Code 1466A says it's illegal to distribute and possess pornography that depicts minors in a sexual act. The bluest eye does both of those, in spades. It was said best by the Justice of the Supreme Court when he said, "I know it when I see it. I see it in print, I see it written, I see it in pictures, I know it." I hope you know it, because it's time that we can stop this absurd discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Andrea Bliss from Liberty Street, resident in the district, parent in the district.
Sorry, I didn't hear what she said.
She's asking if she can speak. She passed the first time.
She passed this evening before?
Yes.
She can do that. Yes, that's fine. Please.
Tom, I would just like to point out, if we allow this, then we need to allow it going forward for everybody, because we're
Okay,
setting
so
precedent.
she passed, is what?
She was called and she said pass. I'm just saying, if, whatever we decide, we need to be consistent. So if we
Agree.
allow that going forward, we need to allow it for everyone.
We're in the same section.
You're putting this on me, huh? Well, I'm going to have to say you pardoned yourself, and I can't accept you to do that again, so. What's that? Oh, she's not there. I'm sorry. So I'm confused who is at the mic. Thank you. You're on the list?
She must be Andrea Bliss.
Yeah.
You're Andrea Bliss?
One and the same.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. Good evening, President Tuttle, Vice President Cook, members of the board. My name is Andrea Mozak Bliss. I live on Liberty Street, and I have 2 kids currently enrolled in Mentor schools at the elementary and middle school levels. I'm here this evening to voice my support of proposed option 2 and to ask that you do the same. Like many of us here, I attended and graduated from Mentor High School, and I value the education that I received here just as I value the education that my children have and will continue to receive in Mentor schools. It is my firm belief that the path to a strong and healthy education must feature involvement and communication between parents and staff. This is something that I feel option 2 aims to accomplish. Option 2 backs parental rights in terms of transparency and parental authority over the content that our own children can check out from school libraries. Option 1 aims to remove classic works of literature from school libraries based on a seemingly intentionally vague definition of the term sexually explicit content, a term that I have heard supporters of Option 1 irresponsibly use interchangeably with the word pornography. While Option 2 offers flexibility, compromise, and opportunity for parents and educators to work together in determining solutions tailored to the comfort and needs of students and families on a case-by-case basis, Option 1 seeks to take educational materials away from all students based on the whims of a select few. On a personal note, when I was a senior at Menor High, my honors English class read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, a book that includes rape. The class discussion of this book led to a very important conversation about consent that the young men and women in my class may not have had otherwise. To this day, I think about and am grateful for the insight and knowledge that my classmates and I gained from that talk, and I dread the idea of my own children being robbed of the advantage of experiencing similar learning opportunities because someone else, without ever having met them, decided it was not appropriate for my children to read something that they have deemed sexually explicit content. I know that we all want what is best for our students, and I urge you to choose Option 2, as it is the option that allows us to parent our own children without limiting the education of anyone else's. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the first section.
Mr. Heath, Superintendent's report.
I want to provide a few updates for everyone on a couple of topics that have been brought up prior to we getting into the consent agenda. First is on the board policy pieces to the puzzle with the communication process that we will be undertaking here soon. We've spent several months reviewing, writing, and editing a new set of board policies with our administrative team and our board members. There are several policies that have changed the way we'll approach our work moving forward. It is now my job to make sure that these policy changes are implemented consistently and effectively across the district. The first step in communicating these changes with our is with our administrators and staff members prior to the beginning of the school year. I actually started this process with our building administrators and department supervisors at our first administrative meeting last Wednesday. I spent a significant amount of time identifying the key policies that will impact our work in the classroom this year. I am sharing a document with our administrative team that includes the policy number, the policy language, and the key talking points for each of the policies that directly impact some of the things that I have been hearing from our community throughout the last year. Some of those topics are around parental rights, selection and use of instructional and library materials, controversial issues, staff ethics, and the use of social media, among others. The next step for me will be to discuss these policies during my opening day speech to all staff in the district on Monday, August 21st. I want that information to come from my voice to their ears so I can assure our community that I've explained the policy changes to our entire staff. There will be a learning curve to this. There are nearly 500 policies in our new manual, but we will continue to reiterate the implementation of these policies throughout the school year. In regards to the pronoun surveys, based on Neola Board Policy 2416, no student will be required to complete a preferred pronoun survey without prior consent from the student's parents. We will continue our practice of not giving any preferred pronoun surveys at the elementary level. And within the administrative guidelines for 2416, we will establish the protocols to ensure a parent's rights to opt their middle school or high school student out of any survey where preferred pronouns would be asked are met. I heard loud and clear in my first week as superintendent that there were concerns with the professional development modules used in previous years through the Better Lessons platform. We put those modules on hold in my first administrative team meeting. Because we have a contract in place with Better Lessons, I spent several meetings working with our curriculum department to identify, review, and select academic training modules that are aligned with state requirements that we have for professional learning for our staff around gifted instruction and support. Our curriculum department has reviewed the slide decks for each module to ensure they are free from any controversial issues, and we have shared that information with our Board of Education members for their review. This step will allow us to meet a state requirement without losing any of the public funds that have already been allocated for this contract. I want to remind everyone about the guidelines we are currently required to follow regarding transgender restroom use. All public school districts have been required to follow the same guidelines with this issue since September of 2016, when a federal judge in a U.S. District Court in Ohio ruled in favor of transgender rights, allowing a transgender girl to use the female restroom in a school in the Highland Local School District in Morrow County. That ruling was upheld in December of 2016 by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in Ohio. Within the last week, another U.S. District Court in Southern Ohio ruled in favor of transgender rights relating to restroom usage in a case filed against the Bethel Local School District in Miami County. This is not a superintendent's decision. This is not a Board of Education's decision. It is current school law in our state, and until there is a change made by our state legislature, the President of the United States, or the U.S. Supreme Court, which actually upheld transgender rights as recently as June 2021, there's nothing we can do to change that. We are, however, watching the progress of House Bill 183, which has been proposed in the Ohio House, which directly addresses this issue. It is currently in the House Higher Education Committee, so we will continue to monitor that bill this fall. I want to give everyone an update on the information we have been gathering on the book challenge with the Bluest Eye. While we have not been able to pull the committee together yet because everyone was on spring or summer break, we have been able to gather some historical information on the book so we know how it has been used in the past. It appears the book was first included on the supplemental materials list in the district sometime in the mid-1990s. I believe I was in middle school then. The book is on the supplemental materials list for 2 courses, Honors English 10 and Regular English 11. We have asked our English teachers at the high school if they have used the Bluest Eye in their course in the past, and none of the current teachers have used it in their time here in Mentor. At the very least, that means it has not been used in over 15 years. We will be having a follow-up conversation with our English department to discuss this book when the teachers come back in the next 2 weeks. When a book is part of our supplemental materials lists for a course, a copy is also placed on the library shelves. In the nearly 40 years that the book has been in our media center, we are aware of it being checked out 9 times. It was checked out within the last 2 years, so it does not qualify to be weeded out based on our guidelines that recently removed over 2,000 books from our libraries. Pending our board policy discussions this evening and the progress of House Bill 722, which addresses sexually explicit content, that is currently in the House Primary and Secondary Education Committee, I am looking at ways to expedite this challenge so we have a resolution no later than this September 12th board meeting. I know last month Mrs. Cook shared some of our state test scores during the student achievement update. The scores she shared showed the comparisons to the state of Ohio test scores. We received a lot of negative comments about making that comparison, so I want to explain the reason we utilize that comparison in our district. Our district leadership team meets twice a year to review all of our national, state, district, and benchmark assessment data at every grade level and every building in the district. The first levels of comparison data that we look at are how did we do compared to last school year and the previous years, and how did the state do compared to previous years. This gives us an indication immediately of the level of difficulty of the state test at each grade level with each content area that year. If we see an area that we did not perform as high on compared to our previous year's data, and then see that the state increased in that area, we can start digging into that data first to identify our challenge areas and develop strategies to improve. Mrs. Cook showed you those first few slides last month to simply provide an overview of the state test scores. In our DLT meeting, we reviewed over 200 slides worth of data to get a true understanding of where we are as a district. We will continue to disaggregate our data and make comparisons to our similar cohort districts around the state. We will tap into our resources and connections we have with other educators in those districts to see where they are improving and what they are doing to help them improve. Are we happy with our scores? Yes and no. We're excited that we maintained or improved in 15 of the 20 state test indicators this year. We are happy that our math scores, which was one of our focus areas this year, improved in all but one grade level. Are we happy with our scores across the board? No. I'm a pretty competitive guy. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied. I know there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I am hopeful that I can devote more of my time to the instructional leadership in these areas now that I'm in year 2 here in Mentor. I believe I've had to answer this question every week that I've worked in this district thus far. So I'm asking for all of your help with this one. Can we please stop the rumor that we have litter boxes in our restrooms? I can assure you that we have never, nor will we ever, as long as I'm the superintendent, have litter boxes in our restrooms. I'm pretty sure our classified union would not allow it. I was at the doctor's office a couple of weeks ago, and as I was sitting in the chair going through the normal first office visit questions with the doctor, her first question when she found out that I was superintendent here was, "So what's up with having litter boxes in the restrooms at the high school?"
Oh, God.
I'm begging, please help dispel this rumor. I have no idea where it started, but it is completely false. As I start my second year here as superintendent, I want to let you know that I've spent a lot of time listening. That was my goal this year, to listen. I've listened and taken copious notes at our board meetings. I've listened during countless individual and small group meetings I have had with parents and community members. I have listened to members of our Business Advisory Council throughout our work this year. And I have listened to our students, teachers, and administrators in all of the school visits I conducted last school year. This year, I want to start moving on some of what I have heard specific to our academic program. I want to solidify our core content areas in math, English, science, and social studies. I want to provide related arts and elective programs that meet the interests all of our students have. I want to build on the amazing CTE programs we have in our district. I want to expand access to College Credit Plus courses for our students. And I want to build connections with our business and industry partners in Mentor to ensure our graduates have the skills they need to step into the wealth of career opportunities we have right here in this community. We will accomplish this through our strategic planning process that will guide the majority of our work this year. We will involve stakeholders from across our district and our community to create the goals and action steps to drive this district forward. And most importantly, we will do this in a positive, respectful way that will be engaging to all people involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath.
And Mr. Jewell, I'll get you the sexual education updates next month for you as well. Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I have the following recommendations listed under the consent agenda and recommend approval of items 6A1 through 6A3.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll, Mr. Wade.
Ms.
We
Payne.
forgot discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do have a question.
Discussion?
I do have a question for discussion. Did you as well?
I just had a comment.
Go ahead.
Mine's just like a kudos. I'm excited about the fly fishing club that has really taken off, and I think the money that anybody gives for that club is amazing because it is very expensive to purchase items for fly fishing. So
It came from the Mentor Schools Foundation.
that's the second one this year, right? I think there was another one earlier too.
It was for this, well, for the Orchard Hollow, I'm
They
sorry.
had received a grant from
It was like 5,000. It was a lot.
one of the companies.
Yeah,
companies.
one of the big
Yeah.
companies. Yeah, it's great. That's all. I just had a
Not an
comment
outdoors
about the
person.
club because I think it's great.
Okay, so my question is, if you could talk a little bit as we're recommending the designated bus stops. And I know we had a speaker address this. I'm sure it's on everyone's mind. As school is starting up, what time does my child get picked up? What time are they brought home? They're creating a schedule. They're planning their work-life balance. And I know that last year we had difficulty because we had lack of drivers. We had lack of drivers, we had lack of substitutes, and it created an issue for parents where sometimes they were sitting 30, 40 minutes before the bus would pick them up. So could you give us an update? I know we've made a big push to employ drivers. We know that there's a bus driver shortage throughout many districts. How are we currently? Are we still hiring drivers? Are we still hiring substitutes? And the number of drivers, did we currently hire at capacity? Do we have enough full-time subs? How many did we have last year versus this year?
So, Rachel, your numbers were almost spot on, so kudos to you. We I believe, unless Mrs. Burnett can correct me, we've hired our final full-time bus driver today. So that brings us to 48 total full-time drivers. We currently have 4, 5, or 6 sub-drivers based on where we may have just hired that last person from. Last year at this time, I believe we had 1, maybe 2 sub-drivers that were available to us, so we're actually a little bit ahead. The one thing that I will mention is our transportation supervisor inherited all the routing because it was done prior to her taking the full-time position last year here. She rerouted the entire district this year to try and be more efficient. A couple of things were happening. We actually had a handful of drivers that had gaps that were small gaps, but they were sitting idle for a period of time. She's closed those gaps so that those drivers are driving continuously now during their shifts. That opened up 4 additional routes for us that are allowing us to be a little bit more efficient in the way we approach things. Right now, we feel like we're in pretty good shape. Her only concern that she has at this point is the transportation of some of our middle school sports teams, since oftentimes they have to leave at like 2 or 3 o'clock, which is during prime time for the afternoon routes at especially at the elementary level. So we're working through those issues right now, and again, hoping to get more subs in to be able to cover some of that for us. We did a job fair this Saturday. We actually had a couple of drivers coming through. One of them already had a CDL, which is phenomenal. The other is going through the process right now of getting his temp license. It was great because the transportation supervisor brought a bus over and had that individual actually sit in the driver's seat and had one of our trainers over his shoulder kind of pointing things out to make sure that he passes that test so that we can get him certified to start driving. We're always going to be looking for more drivers. Again, I think our comfort level from a minimum would be 10. We're currently in that 4, 5, 6 range as far as substitutes go. We do have other administrators in the district that also drive, so we can add them in when necessary, but oftentimes then that takes them out of the office from their supervisory roles to actually drive routes. So we're, again, public plea, we're still looking for drivers. We're in much better shape than we were last year, and we're very hopeful with the rerouting and the efficiencies we have in place that our timing is going to be much better than it was last year.
Thank you.
One additional thing I'll throw out there, and this is something that we just made some final decisions on yesterday. We're working through a different communication system as well. We had a group and a steering committee kind of working through this, not only for transportation, but for the entire district as a whole. So we do have a new system that'll be put in place. We've got a transition plan for that to get it fully implemented here this year, but we're very hopeful that those communication pieces will be a little bit more timely, number one, but then we'll also, instead of just receiving an email, we can also include a text message, so those families that are not constantly checking email can get that notification right away on some of the busing pieces to the puzzle. Final thing I'll mention with busing too, we're still digging through some of the numbers, looking closely at our non-public routes, looking closely at our payments in lieu of transportation. We are trying to save some money across the district, obviously, and we put that to all of our departments, including transportation. So we're going to look closely at some of that here in the next week or two as we're getting ready for school to start, to identify the cost savings that we've been able to have out of this work in the transportation office this year.
I just want to
Thank you for
add that I had asked, there was a question earlier about the private school busing. I believe it's Ohio Revised Code that requires us to bus students to private schools unless we do the payment in lieu of, and if it's within so much radius or so much time. So that's something out of our control. But I did ask how many of those routes are for private schools, just to see how big of an issue it truly is. And there are 3 out of the 49 total routes that are going directly to private schools. There's 15 routes that have both private schools as part of the route and our schools. So something to maybe look into in the future. It doesn't seem like it's as big of an issue that I thought. When I heard that, I was like, this sounds kind of weird that we would have to, transport students to private schools. So I wanted to see how big of an issue it was. And so we do have 3 routes that are just private school routes, but 15 that have both out of 49.
Actually, Annie, we got that reduced to 2 now.
Oh,
so
okay, so
it's
even
2,
less of a-
two
yeah.
full-time drivers are strictly driving non-public routes.
So even if we did something with that, that's still not going to fully solve our
Not
problem.
huge, no.
Thank you. You need to vote.
Ready to vote?
Please call the roll.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion's carried 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I am recommending approval of the resolution adopting a 2023-24 Calamity Day Alternative Makeup Plan.
So moved.
Second.
Comments, input? Please call the roll. Mr. Wade?
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I'm recommending approval of the 2023-24 Parent-Student Handbooks for the preschool, the elementary schools, the middle schools, the high school, and CARES.
So moved.
I'm going to give it to Ms. Jessling. She's sitting next to me.
Please call the roll.
I need a second.
Second.
Ms. Cook?
I'll second.
Can we have discussion, Tom?
Discussion?
Okay. I was looking through the handbooks and I didn't see any dress code in there. So I was wondering if you could touch base on that. And do we get to see the dress code? Because there were a lot of complaints last year of dress code violations or parents saying, we don't have a dress code, and it would be helpful if we had that. We might have it somewhere, but it's just not in the handbook.
Right. Yeah, and I think we talked about that last year around this time as well. There's language in the handbooks, but there's a more detailed piece that the middle schools and high schools send out as well in relation to dress code. And if I'm wrong, I'll correct myself in September, but we can make sure that that language is available to you guys so that you can see that too.
What is the reason that we don't include it in the handbook? And the only reason I'm asking is because as a parent, you would think that, going through the handbook, it's like everything's in there. So it would be helpful if we did include that, even if it is specific to each school, to have it in the handbook, I think would be more helpful than having 2 different pieces of information.
Okay.
So, Mr. Heath, do we get access to see those, the dress code policy? Do we ever vote on that, or? I'm not sure. Can you look into it and just let me know? Okay.
Yeah, and obviously, we've got very vague language in the handbooks, but yeah, we'll make sure we have that included here for next meeting.
Thank you.
And then I'll talk to our principals about including that in that full language in the handbooks moving forward then
Perfect.
too.
Thanks.
Call the roll.
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion's carried 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I'm recommending approval of the contractual agreement with the City of Mentor.
So moved.
Second? Oh.
Discussion? Questions?
And just as a point of clarification, this is that agreement with regard to the EMT Academy.
Which is an outstanding program, by the way.
Yes.
Very fortunate to have that.
Ms.
Please
Cook.
call the roll.
Yes.
Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Ms. Jessling.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I am recommending approval of the contractual agreement with Classic Automotive Group.
So moved.
Second.
Input? Comments?
Another great addition to our CTE program. I think we offer amazing things in our CTE program. This is one of them. I know a lot of us got to tour both the EMT program and this program, and it's just phenomenal. So,
Big thank you to
kudos.
Classic for that, too.
Yeah.
For all of their help.
Yeah, Mrs. Briner and I can remember when we took out the auto shop here. We were heartbroken, but it's come back
big
even
change.
stronger.
That's awesome.
It's fantastic.
Certainly outside of the basics, but it's preparing our kids that aren't going to college for other
And that
options.
community
Yes.
partnership with one of our biggest local businesses gives us resources and equipment
Right here in
and
Mentor.
talent. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Please call the roll, Mr. Wade.
Just finishing my notes here. Sorry. Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Jessling.
Yes.
Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, I am recommending approval of Agenda Item C1 related to certified personnel and C2 through C4, all related to human resource matters.
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Hearing none. Mr. Wade, please call the roll.
Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Jessling.
Yes.
Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. President, members of the board, and Mr. Wade, at this time I would like to introduce our new administrators. I'd like to start with Mr. John Fullerman. John joins the administrative team at Mentor High School as a unit principal this year. He received his bachelor's degree from Cleveland State University and his principal licensure from John Carroll University. Recently, John was with Cleveland Heights University Heights, where he was an assistant principal for the past 8 years, and previously at Summit Academy in Canton for 2 years as an administrator. Prior to being a school administrator, John was a Cleveland Heights police officer. He resides in Chardon and is a busy dad to 3 girls. We would like to welcome John to the Mentor community.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, Mr. Wade, I would like to express my gratitude for selecting me for this position. I am eager to contribute my skills and experience to the success of the Mentor School District. I look forward to serving the community and the school while making a positive impact and being on this amazing team. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mr. Chad Russo. Chad joins our Mentor High School administrative team this year as a unit principal as well. He received his bachelor's degree from Kent State University and master's degree from Ashland University. Chad has been with the district for the past 22 years as a social studies teacher at Ridge Junior High and Mentor High School. He was an assistant athletic director at Mentor High School while also being a key staff member to have Mentor High School recognized with the Purple Star Award, which designates schools who support military families. Chad resides in Mentor and has 2 kids in Mentor schools. Welcome, Chad.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, and Mr. Wade, thank you for allowing me to share this moment with everyone here. I can't put into words how excited I am for this new opportunity in my career. As I get ready to start my 23rd year here at Mentor Schools, it will look a little bit different this year. That's probably why I already have butterflies in my stomach when I think about the first day of school. A few people I'd like to recognize for helping me and assisting me on this journey. Ms. Bobby Borak, who really took me under her wing last few weeks of school and helped answer several questions that I had about becoming a unit principal. Jason Crow and Kathy Burnett, both for having the confidence and trust in me to make that transition from being a classroom teacher to becoming a unit principal. Last but not least, thank you to my amazing wife, Melanie, my 2 children, for always being by my side and giving me the support that I need to accept new challenges when they present themselves. I couldn't be happier to be a member of this administrative team, this school, and most importantly, this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Mrs. Allie Foray. Allie joins the Student Services Department as a special education supervisor and will oversee our integrated preschool program at Garfield. She will also work with Fairfax, Hopkins, Orchard Hollow, Broadmoor, and Lake Catholic. She received her bachelor's degree from Xavier University and master's degree from American College of Education. Allie was hired as a preschool teacher in the district in 2019, but was previously a kindergarten and preschool teacher with Cleveland Metropolitan Schools. Also, congratulations to Allie, who was recently married and bought her first home. So I think you have officially hit the trifecta of stress. So congratulations on your new position.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, and Mr. Wade. I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for the opportunity to work at Mentor Schools as a special education supervisor. As I embark on this new chapter, I carry with me the lessons, experiences gained during my time as an intervention specialist and teacher. I'm committed to upholding the standards of excellence that Mentor School embodies, as well as contributing my utmost dedication to the growth and the progress of our students. The encouragement and support I've received so far has inspired me, and I'm excited to see the positive impact we all will make this coming school year. Thank you.
Mr. Adam Dugas. Adam joins our administrative team as the Bellflower principal. He received his bachelor's degree from Toledo University and master's in educational administration from Ursuline College. Adam has been in the district since 2009 as a teacher at Lake Elementary and also spent a few years as an instructional coach at Hopkins Elementary. He lives in Mentor and has 2 kids that keep him very active, one of which will be at Bellflower this year, which will be fun. Congratulations, Adam.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, and Mr. Wade. I would like to sincerely thank you for this opportunity to serve as the principal of Bellflower Elementary School. Over the last 14 years, I have worked as a teacher in this school district and as an instructional coach. In both of those roles, I had the opportunity to build relationships with staff, students, parents, and the community. I believe those experiences, along with my own core values, align with Bellflower and our district's mission of inspiring students today to reach their full potential. I am grateful for the opportunity to continue my career in Mentor Schools, and I'm excited to begin this new opportunity as an administrator. Thank you.
They all are.
I apologize for the length of my report this evening. I just wanted to be like Bill Wade.
Keep wishing.
That was a good one.
This concludes my portion of tonight's agenda. Thank you.
I will make it up to you next month.
Do you have to?
Yes, I'm required to by law, unfortunately.
Just kidding.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, I will do the section for board business.
Thank you.
It is recommended that the resolution authorizing addendum to the employment contract of the superintendent be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Discussion? Comments? Please call the roll.
Ms.
Mr. Wade?
Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, the second reading and approval of the Mentor Board of Education Neola Policy 2520.03.
So moved?
Comments?
We need a second.
Oh, we need a second. I'm sorry. Sorry. I second that.
I'll take the floor and just kind of go over some of this. So before we kind of dig into the detail of the policy proposal, I'd like to just kind of clarify why Tom and I felt like it was necessary for us to go ahead and propose something specifically in regards to sexually explicit content. And then Mrs. Jeschling had a good suggestion for sexual content to be added to the policy at our last special board meeting. So the way that I see our role as board members is also to serve the community. The community has been very loud over the last couple years, but more recently there have been several book challenges, and a lot of them have kind of fallen into the category of sexually explicit. I don't think it's a good thing for us to continue to have book challenges with sexually explicit material in them. So instead of every single month having these challenges, because we have been told that there will be additional challenges based on the same issues of content being very sexually, graphically explicit. So I sat down with Tom, and we sat with our board attorney, and then Mr. Heath as well, and we felt like it was important to address this for our community because we serve the community, and they have spoken very loudly. I think it would be not responsible for us not to respond in some way to address their concerns. We may not all agree, but I think it's the responsible thing to do to try to address the concerns that have been brought to us by the community. So when Tom and I sat down, we kind of, after we talked with our attorney, we had to come up with some type of definition for sexually explicit content. We wanted to be very specific so that there isn't any kind of gray area of, oh gosh, you know, this old classic has the word rape in it, are we going to get rid of it? So I just want to read the sexually explicit definition, just so everybody's kind of on the same page. This is what we came up with. So it says, for the purposes of this policy and those that policy is cross-referenced herein, sexually explicit shall be defined as any written language graphically describing or images, pictures, photographs, drawings, movies, or other visual depictions portraying sexual intercourse, masturbation, sadism, masochism, bestiality, fellatio, cunnilingus, pedophilia, molestation, rape, or incest. So it is very, very specific. And we said, we added, due to Mrs. Cook's suggestion, she said, you know, I think it would be better if we had at the last board meeting where we discussed this, if we inserted the language that says graphically describing. We also added sexual content to address some of the concerns that were brought by Ms. Jeschling and some of the other board members about those classic books that might not raise to the level of sexually explicit, but might have content in them that could be objectionable to some parents. So we kind of took both options that were originally, there was an option 1 and option 2. We kind of put them together to address both concerns. So the sexual content would really kind of address those things that we talked about at the last meeting that were classics that may include some sexual content but don't rise to the level of, let's say, rated R, where we wouldn't have it in the schools. So I'm confident in this policy. I think it is our job to address the concerns of the community. I think they expect us to have a standard. Parents don't want, majority of parents I don't think want sexually explicit materials that are graphically described about, minors being raped by their fathers. We've had 2 books already being challenged that include that information. I think the responsible thing to do would be to pass this policy as is. It addresses the AP concerns, because I did learn from talking with Mr. Heath that I wasn't aware of, that the AP courses are College Board approved, so there are certain things that we can't change in them. So we added that language in there as well, and I'm comfortable with that, with notifying parents, though, that language, that they could be exposed to sexually explicit information. So that is in the bottom portion of the policy. We also addressed the College Credit Plus courses along the same lines. We don't have control over that, so we excluded that. And then also any kind of state mandated curriculum, such as, state mandated sex ed courses. So I feel like it's really all in here. I'm not really willing to compromise any further on this. I think that we are expected to have a standard that we will uphold, and I don't think we want to give parents one more thing that they will have to do to opt their children out of it. I think that would be their responsibility if they want these books to go ahead and get them from the public library, or like somebody suggested tonight, I think was a good suggestion, if a teacher has a book that we can't provide, they could always email the parent and say, hey, this is another book, we're not providing it, but feel free to go to the public library. So that is kind of the why and where I stand on the policy.
So I read it very thoroughly, and of course we were all together for our work session, so I jotted down a few notes that I thought capsulized my thoughts. Back in the late 90s, Mr. Fred Rogers wrote the Let's Talk About It series. It's 4 separate titles: Adoption, Divorce, Extraordinary Friends, and Step Families, offered particularly helpful resources for parents by tackling confusing topics in a reassuring and truthful way. They were examples of the power of books to provide information that may be very important for some, but not necessarily wanted at all by others. Individual families could use those books depending on their unique circumstances. The chance for young readers to see themselves and to understand the world through stories and in nonfiction books has great value, and that's a key consideration in any library's collection development plan. A person familiar with school librarianship knows the selection process that is the professional standard. The media specialist and mentor has a demanding job that was once shared by more than a dozen certified professionals. Her work encompasses the management of all digital, print, and ephemeral resources in the K-12 collections. It isn't possible to read every item. Instead, she follows the district's best practices guidelines, as has been done since the 1960s in school libraries everywhere, to purchase books using professional references, reviews, book looks, etc. It's a system that works well for most, but not all viewpoints. The Harry Potter books are an example of a beloved series that raised objections for some parents. However, the number of actual books borrowed from our media centers at the secondary levels is low. To give a comparison point, an elementary building of about 400 students might borrow between 5,000 to 10,000 books during the school year. At Menor High, more than 2,000 students borrowed a total of 745 items in 22-23, and some fraction of that number would be fiction titles. Secondary students are generally utilizing databases and other curated online resources for their school assignments. The fiction being read are usually books required by their English or social studies classes and may be from classroom sets. Other fiction titles in the secondary media centers are getting so little use that this extensive discussion seems out of proportion to the actual demand. And we're providing easy public library access at the high school when approved by their parents for students to request whatever they would like to borrow. One could even ask whether a fiction collection makes sense for the high school at all. When compared to all the content surrounding young adults, from television, YouTube, movies, music lyrics, video games, cell phones, streaming services, and social media, it's hard to equate concerns about a passage from a rarely read novel to the graphic extremes to which they may be regularly exposed in the world around them. That's where parents are working hard to guide, limit, and discuss those complex issues to protect their children based upon their family's beliefs. Parents might decide what is right for their household. I fully support respecting and empowering all parents to have that control. Further, we don't know the individual circumstances or needs of one child versus another. I agree with Mrs. Payne that students' maturity levels are best assessed by their parents, therefore allowing each parent to precisely choose what is right for their child makes complete sense. This materials policy that we have before us this evening is one that we've spent hours discussing and researching. We had a 2.5-hour work session to collaborate on the policy language that would best serve our school community, particularly after input from the board attorney. There were concerns about interpretation of what qualifies as explicit content. He was concerned that even one word could be problematic. We discussed classics from Shakespeare to Hawthorne to Orwell and how those literary works might be embraced by some while being rejected by others. Given the fact that we've received multiple emails with sincerely held while directly opposing viewpoints, urging this board to both restrict access to books and to never restrict such access, we are left with a conundrum. What complicates the matter further is that very few of those who have expressed their opinions regarding this topic have children currently attending our schools. We don't have data to guide us as to what all those parents want. And it doesn't matter if what the majority favors is wrong for even one household. Either way, a decision may trivialize the needs of some of the students we serve. So I think the right course of action is to individualize and empower each family to set its own guidelines. They don't have to abide by a majority because their sovereign role is honored and determines exactly what their children may access. That safeguard would include materials that are studied as part of a class, any required or supplemental reading that is assigned, and even more broadly, what a student can check out from the Media Center. Respecting the parental role and offering full transparency is what has been a central part of our discussions for many months, particularly when Mrs. Payne and I have attended the district curriculum meetings. A parental notification mandate can be formalized in Board Policy 252003. It aligns with the state of Ohio's proposed legislation referencing all instructional materials. It means that no administrator or teacher has to discern if something is or isn't explicit, as our attorney warned that there is subjectivity in making that choice. This alerts parents where there might be some sexual content of any kind and leaves it to them to review and decide if they wish to have alternative material assigned. They can opt for notification via Infinite Campus of any items selected from the Media Center collections, and that's already in place. What's the reason that no other district in Ohio, perhaps in the country, has a policy with language like this? In the draft paragraph under sexually explicit content, there's an implied equivalency in the list of topics blending normal and deviant behavior. What happens if something is left out? That itself could create confusion and failure to support and respect parental expectations. Even within a household, different children might have different needs and sensitivities. By handing parents the full power to choose, decisions are perfectly tailored to each student. As a nation, we value our individual freedom to read what we wish. It's been stated many times by those who are challenging books that they are not censoring or banning them. This approach bypasses any slippery slope that imposes the views of some over the rights of others. The process of challenging materials and the time and cost invested may be unnecessary because every parent will be notified of all selections. They can guide what their own children read in light of their ethical or religious views. I support local control, and this is the very concept of that in its purest form.
I have some questions. To be quite honest, I was pretty surprised when we had the draft of the policy that Tom and I had originally proposed to see several options added in, which Tom and I had taken out for today's meeting. So what you're seeing here is just what Tom and I stand by. But I was very surprised on Friday when I saw the additional options put in there, because where we left off at the last board meeting that was in front of everybody, taped, was on a good note where we all agreed, not all of us, but where we had three with Mrs. Jeschling agreeing with both parts, option 1 and option 2. So I have a couple questions and a couple comments. The first question I would have is, did the attorney tell you something different than what he told me and Tom with Mr. Heath? And if so, why were we not included in that conversation? Because if we're being told something, we were told, this is defendable, and then you are not being told that same thing, that's a problem. So that's my first question is, who met with the attorney, and how did all three of you come to the same reasoning?
I didn't meet with the attorney. I was basing it on our conversation during our work session, that there were concerns about some words or definitions. That's why we began that discussion, furthering, well, what about classic books? What I might think is fine, someone else might be offended by. That's what I meant about the Harry Potter series. That would seem innocuous to many, but not to everyone. And so concerns about a list, what if something's not on the list? That's something that I was concerned about as I reviewed this and read it and reread it and reread it a third, fourth time. So as I was looking at it, I just, in my mind, taking any judgment out of it and simply giving every parent the full power to control for their family what is right or what isn't. And that we've already put in place the idea of this, but this would codify it.
So I get what you're saying, and I can appreciate that, which is why I was for adding the sexual content piece to the policy. I think that people expect us to have a certain level of standard. Even though the culture changes, our standards necessarily don't have to. People still expect us to have a certain standard that we uphold as a school. And I think that allowing parents to have a choice sounds great, but at the same time, if we think about the possible harm that could be done to a child who may have gone through something that was sexual abuse, and let's say the other child in the classroom starts talking about this book that they have, and now the harm that could be done to that other child who doesn't even read the book, but because it's provided by the curriculum and they choose that book, we could have harm to children who may have gone through traumatic events. I know Mr. Heath actually was in a discussion with me and somebody from the community about their child who's in Mentor schools that went through a very traumatic event. And this kind of material, these types of books, even if they're not in her hands, if somebody next to her brings it up and has the book there and says, hey, check this out, that could set them back years in their counseling efforts. So I think that there is a standard. We don't have no dress code policy and just leave it up to parents, hey, whatever you want your child to wear. We still have a standard. We have to have standards that parents would support, and those materials, those sexually explicit materials that our board attorney did support, he wouldn't have written the policy if it wasn't something that they could defend, is very specific. And I don't find any one of these definitions okay for minors to graphically view or read. I don't know which one of these terms are you okay, where you would say that the benefit for the sexually explicit information would outweigh, or the literacy value would outweigh the sexually explicit content when we're talking about pedophilia, molestation, rape, incest, fellatio, bestiality, masochism, masturbation, sexual intercourse. Those are things that I just feel like we don't need in schools. Those are standards that I feel like can be upheld, that parents would expect us to abide by and not have to make them opt out of these options.
Mr. Tuttle, we do have, I'd like just to call a point of order here, because with Robert's rules, one person speaks and then everyone else has a chance to speak. And then when everyone is done, you can have a second turn. But we're kind of going with a back and forth here, and we all have opinions, so if we could move forward.
That's perfect timing, because you've never called that before. Just saying.
I
We've
just-
done it
I
like
just
this
learned
many
of it.
times. Sure.
Appreciate it.
Sure you did.
Very interesting. So what you're suggesting, we need to end the discussion?
No, I'm just suggesting that we're going back and forth between two members, and I know other people want to speak. I have comments. I believe Mrs. Briner
I
does.
do have comments.
I'm assuming you do as well.
So, it's a good point. Okay.
You could speak.
Mrs. Cook, you'd like to speak?
Yes, thank
You
you.
have the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss my thoughts on the proposed policy 2520.03 tonight. Before I begin, I'd like to share a couple passages that contain content that some might view as questionable. And as a listener, you can decide if this content is appropriate for your child to hear or read. And this is the first passage. It is written by a young girl. Unconsciously, I had these feelings even before I came here. Once when I was spending the night at Jackie's, I could no longer restrain my curiosity about her body, which she'd always hidden from me and which I'd never seen. I asked her whether, as proof of our friendship, we could touch each other's breasts, and Jackie refused. I also had a terrible desire to kiss her, which I did. And every time I see a female nude, such as the Venus in my art history book, I go into ecstasy. Sometimes I find them so exquisite, I have to struggle to hold back my tears. If only I had a girlfriend. And this is the second passage. I turned around, and before I knew it, he was on me. Just run up behind me, he did. He got me round the neck, cussing me and saying dirt. I fought and hollered, but he had me round the neck. He hit me again and again. He chucked me on the floor, and he choked me and took advantage of me. Now, as I read these passages, you could sense that some people are less comfortable than others. And if I were to take a vote, the consensus in the room about the appropriateness of these passages would not be unanimous, not even close. The first passage you heard tonight was from Anne Frank's diary, and the second was from To Kill a Mockingbird. It is somewhat unfair of me to ask you to make an informed judgment without the context of the full novel. There are some people in this room that feel that this content is not appropriate for their child, and this is okay. It is okay if everyone in this room doesn't agree. Different people have different opinions about what is appropriate for their children. What may be considered explicit to one person may not be to another. And as such, decisions to remove materials should be made with careful consideration and should be based on clear policies and procedures that are transparent. Creating policy is something that I take very seriously. I want you to understand that I must consider the implications of all policy and ensure that it is understandable and enforceable. And as I work to understand this policy, I sought legal counsel and completed research about similar policies. As a result, I formed opinions about various parts of this policy. First, I would like to address the first section that addresses a process related to sexually explicit content. I am not convinced that this policy clearly delineates sexually explicit from sexual content. This vagueness makes the policy difficult to enforce. The passages I read today may be deemed explicit to some and not to others, because it is a matter of opinion. The second section of this policy addresses a policy for materials with sexual content. This process acknowledges parental rights. I support this plan. I support notifying parents that material contains sexual content. I support the right of parents to review material. I support a parent's rights to request alternate material. The sexual content process described in this policy is enforceable and clear. I see a clear difference from opting some students out based on a partnership with parents and eliminating all content from all students based on the opinions of others. There are over 55,000 people living within the boundaries of Mentor Public Schools, and we have heard from approximately 50 people. Some are in opposition of this policy and some are in support. This is hardly a representative sample. Furthermore, I have serious concerns that a policy that eliminates content for everyone also limits access to educational content and intellectual freedom. Limits may include access to AP class content in literature or psychology. It may limit topics addressed in nursing, health, criminal justice, or our EMT Academy. And it may limit a discussion about rape being used against enslaved people. And it may censor current event topics that are discussed in class. This policy is not limited to fiction materials, and the implications can be far-reaching. It is contradictory to our policy that states that materials are read in their entirety during a challenge, and they are not judged on a single passage. I am in support of adopting the process to notify parents when sexual content is present, to allow parents to review materials, and to provide them with alternative materials that are right for their child. I believe that these discussions are important and that we can come to a compromise as a team together that is clear and enforceable. Thank you.
I attempted to follow everything you had to say. What's interesting, I did take a note of one thing you did say, where in the book you quoted, "took advantage of me." Is that
would be
sexual
rape.
contact or content?
That would be
or
rape.
is that sexually explicit? Or is that implied?
Well, I
That's
think that's
implied.
the problem, is that it is up to interpretation.
Because it's implied. And when we spoke with the attorney, he said you have to be careful about using implied words, because implied is to each person interpretation
Well,
or
I
feeling.
want to follow
But we
policy
tried to
and hear
tempt it-
from everyone,
excuse
but
me.
I'm happy to answer
Point of
that
order.
and what I heard about.
Point of order.
the-
It was, Tom had the floor.
We're-
So.
It speaks directly to sexually explicit. There is no ifs, ands, or buts or misinterpretation of those visual depictions portrayed that we have listed there. And our attorney said that is defensible. And that's an easy interpretation as far as those actions, those verbs. It's not implied, it's there. How can you argue about that? And do you want that in the books that our students can take home and read, or read it here in the library, or access it on their iPads, their Chromebooks? I mean,
What I don't want to answer and be out of order, so.
I understand that, but
I mean,
I'm
I
confused
will.
by that because this is very straightforward. There's no implication whatsoever. So if we don't have it, then it's okay in the books? Is that what you're stating?
I'm confused about what you're asking me.
If we had books that contained those specifically descriptive words, explicit, are those books okay in our public library, our school, in our public system, in the high school?
I believe that parents can decide for their own children, so I believe that every time that there's any content, no matter how vague or explicit, if there's a notification put out, then the parent can decide for their own child what they feel is appropriate.
We have that in part 2 of that, it's sexual content.
Yes, and I completely agree with that section.
That's
That's
in
what I
there.
was stating, that I agreed with that section.
Well, I disagree with you. I think this can be supported and defended by our policy is applicable, and we should not be in the business of providing materials in sexually explicit content. It's not what we're engaged to and charged by the state to teach. We're not, it's not part of the curriculum.
And I hear that point. I spoke with legal counsel. When I was reviewing the policy, I asked to speak with legal counsel. And when I spoke with legal counsel, our lawyer was very clear with me that when he spoke with both of you, that he said it is like a litmus test. If it's in, if the words are in, then the book is out. So if it is discussing rape, the book is out. And if it is discussing any of those other topics, the book is out. So we were trying to come to a way to make it delineate the two between sexually explicit and sexual content. And that's where we added the word graphically in. I don't feel that it is still clear that we can be enforceable across the board all the time to the same level. That's just my opinion, and the board may feel differently, but based on the legal counsel that I received, I have concerns that we can enforce this clearly. And so I feel that it is more appropriate to create a policy that is clearly enforceable, which means if there's any sexual content, parents are immediately notified, and then parents decide if their child can read the book or not.
Mayor? Tom, I believe you're doing the same thing that Annie's doing, and that's having a discussion. So I think we should all have a turn to
Go right ahead.
state our feelings on the policy. Is that okay?
Go right ahead, Mary.
Okay. I don't think it should be a discussion. So I just had a couple comments here. I've heard the statement, the majority of parents want this policy, and I don't know how you quantify that. I think we had 12, maybe 13 speakers on the first half of our public comments. I don't know how many of them have students in the school district. Several of them stated, excuse me? Mr. Tuttle, can you please get order? Thank you. You know, this is about the students in the school district, and this is a decision that we're making. We're talking about our community. That's the point I'm trying to make. We received 12 emails about this subject before our meeting. That doesn't include the 3 that we got from the same individual, one which was a biblical reference, so I counted that as 1. So when we talk about the majority of parents, like I said, that's hard to quantify. We're also getting comments and emails from parents on the other side, okay? I know people are passionate about this, and I appreciate that. I understand that. I think it's important to note that nobody is pushing any books, any topics, and I'm not going to repeat all those nasty words. We've heard them plenty. Nobody's pushing that on anyone, contrary to what some people may think or say. From my conversation with Mr. Heath, do other school districts have this policy in Ohio? No. And that came from our attorney. So we would be the first district in Ohio. Does Neola have this policy in any other school districts? No. So that is worth noting. Okay. Regarding what we have in front of us, I've heard sexually explicit, I've heard obscene, I've heard pornography. Again, I think it's subject to interpretation. Who came up with this definition? I'm hearing Mrs. Payne and Mr. Tuttle did. Is this list of these nasty words all-inclusive? Again, it sounds like it came up from these two individuals. I believe there are some missing words that could be included there, be that as it may. I believe the term sexual content is broader. Again, I feel that sexually explicit is subject to interpretation. I don't like it. I think it sets us up for possibilities. I mean, in a court of law, anything is possible. I think by going the route of sexual content, and we've heard the term parental rights for how many years now? It's about parental rights. And I'm for letting parents make that decision for their children, not this board saying, take out the books, vet the books, ban the books. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I am not for banning books, whatever you want to call it. Vetting is the latest term.
Mr. Tuttle.
I believe that by talking about sexual content and giving parents that individual choice for their child, this is a win-win. It's individualized, and each parent can choose for their child.
Mrs. Briner, have you released the floor?
Excuse me, I'm not finished.
Okay.
I'm not qualified to make curriculum decisions, and I'm not a psychologist. So I can't say how someone is going to react to reading a book. That's not up to me. I don't make those, what do you want to call it, assumptions, okay? We can assume all day long. But again, if parents are involved, I think that's what would make people happy. I really do. I think that is doing our due diligence. But to say no one across the board can read these books, I don't think that's up to us. And again, deciding on curriculum is not the job of a board member. That's all I had to say. I'll defer to you, Mr. Tuttle.
Thank you.
Mr. Tuttle, since you released the floor, can I
Mrs. Payne?
Can I finish my remarks as well?
Yes.
So I disagree vehemently with Mrs. Briner that we are not to have discussion. That is our job, to have discussion. There are pieces and parts that we could all provide that could make this policy better or different. And I think that that is our job, to discuss things. If you watch the State Board of Education meetings, you'll see them do just that. I'm surprised that coincidentally, when I propose a policy with Tom's support, point of order is called and Robert's Rules of Order are called when we have never done that before. So it's a little interesting there. I just want to make that point. I have several other points that I would like to make in reference to some of the comments that were just made. I heard banning books. This is not banning books. Banning books would be these books are no longer allowed anywhere. We have a public library that would still have them. There are some books that would have pictures in them that would depict these words that you called nasty, Mrs. Briner. And I would agree with you. They are nasty words, but they are even more nasty when they're graphically described or depicted in pictures. So I think that that is even more reason to support not having sexually explicit materials for our minor students in school. We also know that we currently have one person who has filed a criminal complaint against Mentor Schools for pandering obscenities to minors. And last I checked, we have they're waiting for a decision from us on The Bluest Eye. Okay, so we finish that, let's say the book goes away. There could be another one if we don't have a policy in place to prevent those types of books from being provided or having access to for minors. So I think we would still run into that issue. I don't know what Mrs. Cook was told that was different than what Mr. Tuttle and I were told with our board attorney. It was not told to us the same way. Certainly the terms were not, if it has this word in it, it's out. It was, or it wouldn't have included the words written language or depicting or pictures. Pictures don't have words, so that wouldn't fit. So I would like to make a point about that. I really, in all honesty, I went to Mentor schools all through kindergarten through 12th grade. It was amazing. Thankfully, I didn't run into some of these books. And had I have ran into some of these books, let's say my mom didn't check the email, because parents get a lot of emails. And we know that they get different emails every day and how many are actually checked. If I was to read that book, I certainly don't think that I would want those images in my head. We had an email today from an adult that said that they read this book, and while it was written beautifully, I'm talking about The Bluest Eye, while it was written beautifully and it was a good book, those graphic descriptions of not just that passage of the whole book read in its entirety are still left in their mind. And that's an adult. I think the community requires that we have standards. I understand your opinions. You can have a different opinion. I don't think changing this policy to a watered-down version of it is something that the community is going to support. I think that people have been speaking out for a long time about what they expect our standard to be. We are not banning books. We are vetting them for age-appropriate materials for minors. We're talking about minors. So I think we need to uphold the standard that has been set. Although other schools don't have a policy like this, we've got policies that other schools don't have. We also know that maybe those other schools don't have these types of books in their schools. They could. I can tell you that Riverside did have the book identical. I can also tell you that the second a parent wrote in about that book, it was pulled immediately. So, because they don't want sexually explicit materials in their schools. I would assume that was the reason why, but it was pulled immediately. So I do think that we can have a policy that other places don't have, and I certainly would be happy to be the first policy in Ohio to prevent minors from having graphic detail depicting these words in graphic descriptions, because it's inappropriate for minors. I don't think it's our job to give minors access to these types of materials. If under the same lines of parental rights, the parent has the right to go out to the public library and go get the book. So I think that there are kids who could be harmed by this more than they could be helped by this, by books like that, I should say. If you're going to look at an opt-out process, and if I'll be outvoted, which I'm sure I would, I think that an opt-in process might be more appropriate. If you ask parents, how many of you want to support your children reading this definition of these words in graphic detail, go ahead and opt your child in so that you can read books like that. That would be an alternate to an opt-out, in my opinion. So I stand firm. I don't think that minors should have access by trusted adults, teachers, educators, librarians, to materials that are sexually explicit and graphically described or depicted. And I think that definition is very specific. I don't find any one of those terms, if they were graphically described, as being acceptable for minors, and I stand firm on that.
Any other?
No, I mean, I appreciate that viewpoint. For me, it's defining graphically, and then how does that fit into curriculum? I know that you mentioned health class. Health class is not state mandated. It is mandated that we have health class. There's not a state mandated curriculum. There is a lot of courses that we have that they're not mandated that we have them, but they are good, well-rounded education. You know, classes like psychology and criminal justice and nursing. These are topics that they will most likely cover rape and maybe in graphic detail. And by limiting these things, the first sexually explicit content would limit those discussions in those classes, because I would imagine that it could be quite graphic. Using sexual content gives us the freedom to alert parents and make everyone aware that this is happening. And it's not just an awareness, and it's not an opt-in or an opt-out. This is our standard, that if there is sexual content, our standard is you will be notified, and you can look at the material and review it yourself, and you can ask for alternate material for your own child. Those are the steps that are lined out in this policy, and I completely support that. It's a great middle-of-the-road compromise. I feel that we do have an obligation to hear the community concerns, and I think that this is a wonderful compromise where we are hearing community concerns. It's also stronger language than anyone in the state of Ohio has. There is not, this policy related to sexual content is also not anywhere else. So it's not that we are turning a blind eye and that we are pandering pornography. It is simply informing parents and understanding that there is some content that is discussed in some classes. We would make parents aware of it beforehand, but that there are cases where it is appropriate to have mature discussions.
Anything?
I had, when under the exclusions from the policy coverage, it talks about district approved, or it excluded district approved curriculum. To Mrs. Cook's point, I think our health curriculum is locally selected, if I'm not mistaken. We have to have it, but we choose what it is. So whatever the comprehensive curriculum is that's included there should be under that umbrella, that this isn't applying to that. However, and you're correct, the college credit plus Mrs. Payne, that is not under our authority to control. We don't notify, parents sign off on that if they opt their student into any of those classes. However, the AP classes, which are controlled by the College Board, we don't alter their content or lists or any of that. However, we could certainly follow that process related to sexual content to alert parents. So I thought that was a good addition. You know, I understand how a provocative list can imply that we've got shelves filled with outrageous books. In my remarks, what I hope to convey was that a selection policy looks at many factors. The reason why the Bluest Eye has been in our collection for 40 years is because of those external factors, but as you pointed out, it certainly is not for everyone. But is it for no one? And if we have the explicit caveat, that means it is for no one. And we have 18-year-olds in our senior class. If you're 17, you can see any movie. You know, so in my mind, tailoring whatever we do to empower individual parents to control what our school is offering for their child, their children, seems to me the best middle ground that's respectful of the needs, beliefs, cultures across the board, and that it abridges no one's freedoms. And in the case that you had mentioned, what if a book was brought up in discussion? If a parent is opting their son or daughter out, they won't be participating in that discussion. They'll have an alternate material provided so that they can have an equally challenging opportunity to learn and grow and be exempted from something that the parent objects to. Because I don't know how you can make it right for everyone without taking that approach. That's just my point of view.
So, are we ready to vote on this?
I think we've got...
Please call the roll, Mr. Wade.
We've got different versions, so what are we voting on? We would have to define what we're voting
We're
on.
voting on what's in the agenda.
No, we're voting on this resolution.
The policy that's in the agenda.
This second
That
reading.
includes the sexually explicit content.
Yes.
As it is written. We're not going to rewrite it tonight.
Okay.
Either passes or it fails.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to,
Well, we have a motion on right now,
You
the
said-
first reading.
Our
We either
motion-
vote yes or
our
no.
motion is to discuss. Is that
What's that?
correct? Our motion is to discuss right now. Right now, we're discussing the policy.
Well, Mr. Tuttle just called the roll. He said, please call the roll. So,
Yeah, I said, please call the roll.
so we're
done.
voting on the policy as is right now.
I'd like to continue discussion.
I don't want to sit another hour, 2 hours and try to weed this out and we won't come to a conclusion.
I
Let's
understand.
pass or fail this. We've had the discussion. I've called for the roll.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to amend this policy.
Following Robert's Rules of Order, he already called the roll, though. I don't think you can go
Yeah,
back
I've called the
and
roll.
amend the policy.
You reckon amend it.
But the roll
come
had
back
not
to it at a
been,
work
the
session.
roll had not been called,
What's
He
that?
just said, please call the roll.
but he did not call the roll yet.
Well, he gave the order as the residing
I
president.
asked Mr. Wade to please call the roll.
So,
I don't want to end up with nothing. So that's my concern.
we're going to end up with a watered-down version of what was presented.
We'll have a work session.
Well, you said, please call the roll. We should be calling the roll. We should be voting on this. And then if other board members would like to propose a policy, then
I don't believe, just because the president said call the roll, overrides the majority of the board, though. You have options to amend, you have options to table if you don't want to vote on it tonight because there's further discussion. If you wanted to suspend discussion because of a time constraint, someone can make that motion. There's options for motions for anybody to make. And then if the majority of the board then agrees, if it is seconded, obviously everything has to be seconded, or it dies on the vine, so to speak. But you could make a motion to, you could end the discussion if there's an agreement the discussion is over. There could be a motion to suspend discussion and table the current motion until further notice, or you can motion to amend. Because a vote wasn't taken, I don't believe, my understanding of Robert's rules, that we're done. But if the board is a majority still feels there's a discussion to be had, I don't think we can just automatically call the roll either. because it's the majority of the board. So,
So because the finalized, the version that we're voting on is now going to possibly be amended, I don't feel that we should vote on a policy that the public didn't get to review and provide input on. I mean, we ended somewhere very different after the last special board meeting than where we are right now. And I think the public deserves to see what is going to be our final say on this policy in writing before we vote on it.
I agree with that. Yeah, definitely. We don't have the time to get it accomplished this evening and do it right.
so you could suspend discussion and table the current motion to further discussion at a different time.
So, to understand that correctly, if we made amendments today, would this be first reading, or would it go to a first reading next time?
I think it goes back to what the board feels is best for the current situation, right? I mean, Robert's rules is just to kind of just make sure that the process goes through so that when the sausage is made at the very end, that everyone feels that it's gone through an appropriate process, right? That it's been fair and consistent. My suggestion, if you want one, I'll be happy to give you one.
Please do.
My suggestion is if you need more time, you table the current vote, you continue discussion at a later date, you create a policy that you feel comfortable with presenting back to the community for a vote, and then you have a vote. That's what we've done in all other situations. We've had discussions in the past as a group where we haven't made changes to board policy because of the fact we wanted to make sure it goes through the proper reading of a first reading and then a second reading, because we didn't want to have any issues with the policy enforcement. So as someone who likes to remain conservative in that approach, I think the best decision at this point would be, based on what I'm hearing, the recommendation from my office to make sure that we're compliant with policy, is that we hold off voting because it appears that certain members want to have a policy. It's just we haven't agreed yet on what the policy is going to be. So my suggestion would be to have a motion to table the current policy until further discussion can be had. And if that motion is seconded and then voted upon, that would do that.
Because it does seem like the five of us want a policy, but there's divergence on the detail.
And you have to have a policy that's enforceable.
Can we still vote on the rest of the policy? Because we have school starting in, what, 2 weeks?
The rest of the
This policy does not preclude the board from voting on the remainder of the policies.
Okay. Just checking.
So could you define that? So we can vote on a portion of this policy as it's read.
No, I believe my understanding of Mrs. Briner's question was is if we tabled this current discussion that we're having,
Okay.
can we then vote on the rest of the policies as...
Oh, the rest of the policies.
Correct,
I thought you were
I
referring
was
to
just
this.
asking about the rest of the policy.
The rest
Correct.
of the policy. Yeah, we can do that, can't
If
we?
Yes.
table it.
Okay. Good, good, good.
Is that acceptable? Ginny?
Yeah, to
We need-
table it.
So does that mean we're going to have another work session?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Would we be able to bring in our board attorney since we have discrepancies between what we were told and what Maggie was told?
That would probably have to happen in executive session because of the fact that it's a legal opinion.
I mean,
of that.
otherwise, we're going to keep doing this
Correct.
instead of everybody hear it at the same time, talk about it.
I don't feel
So
we
after
need to have
after we
legal
meet with the
counsel,
attorney,
do you?
then we could go out of executive session and back into public
Just talking
session
about
and
bringing in
discuss
legal counsel.
the policy without bringing up the attorney.
Violating attorney-client privilege, correct.
Do we feel like we need legal counsel at that meeting?
Yes.
Ginny?
I'm fine with legal, I never did speak with the attorney nor hear from him.
I mean, the changes that I want made in the policy, I don't feel like I need legal counsel there for that.
No, I would agree with you. I would be comfortable with a portion of it, but it's very important to you to speak with the attorney.
I mean, I've spoken with Craig. I understand what legal counsel said, if anyone else feels that they need to speak with them.
I've spoke with legal counsel. I know what he told me.
I did too, but we have different interpretations of what was told. So I think it would be imperative if we're going to make decisions that we make sound decisions based on everybody hearing the same thing.
Can I make another recommendation, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
I would encourage us to have legal counsel as a part of the discussion because of the fact that this policy has to be able to be enforced. The board has to feel comfortable with the policy as written to enforce it, so that when we do enforce it, that we're enforcing it consistently in a way that does not put the district in a situation where we're liable to not be consistent. I mean, I think if I heard anything tonight, it's about the consistency and enforcement and the standard of said enforcement. So by having a discussion with legal counsel to help ensure that we have a agreed upon standard, that we all are hearing the exact same thing, I think it would be important to do that so that Mr. Heath or myself or any administrator in the district, when they have to enforce any policy, knows that they're doing it in the fair and consistent way that doesn't make us have future issues because we're not enforcing any policy consistently.
Especially since with all of this, there's clearly some gray area, and we're the only ones who have this policy. It's not a Neola policy, therefore we're going to be kind of on our own should there be a challenge. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, we would be setting the standard.
So
And
we're
there's
sticking ourselves out there.
correct.
Then, yeah, it makes sense to have an executive session.
When would we like to have that?
When?
We should table the motion.
And then we can discuss that.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we need a motion to table at this point.
Yes.
No.
Or we're just going to sit here.
I'll motion to table it. I'd rather it be tabled than be amended on the spot and voted on.
Well, I'll second that.
So you need to call the roll.
Discussion or roll call, Mr. President?
Discussion? Anyone?
I wish we could move forward with it tonight and get it hammered out, but if we want more discussion with legal counsel, then I'm
Okay.
amicable to that.
So are you saying that we would vote on a version tonight, have further discussion with legal counsel, and then modify what we
I mean, my
accept?
preference would be to see what we can all come to a compromise on tonight and vote on it and move forward. But it sounds as if Mrs. Payne would like to hear legal counsel. So if we want to do that I can agree to that. But I think we could make a compromise tonight, but that's just me.
I think we have a duty to be transparent with the community. And so because we landed somewhere different at our special board meeting, and we have difference of opinion on the attorney and what they told us, I think it would be the responsible thing to do, to meet again and meet with the attorney and talk about it. I don't think it's right to come up with something. We haven't done that in the past where we amend a policy on the same night and then try to approve of the policy. I don't think that's transparent.
So we have a motion that was made and seconded. So do we have a vote? Do you need Annie to clarify that motion?
Just need the roll.
Mr. Wade, you explained it perfectly for what we need to do.
Will we take roll?
Please call the roll.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Ms. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
The motion to table the current motion on the floor is approved 5-0. Mr. Heath, did you want to try to figure out when to squeeze in a work session, or do you want to do that later?
We can do that in new business if we want to wait until then. That way we can
keep going?
Keep going.
Perfect.
Next on the agenda. Board of
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, the second reading and approval of the Mentor Board of Education Neola Policy Manual on board docs.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Oh, we need discussion.
Uh-oh. Discussion, please.
I had a couple policies I wanted to double check. 2240, controversial issues. I have some questions on that one. Mr. Heath, or actually the board, there's a section in here that talks about how students can initiate the topic of controversial issues. And I wanted to just clarify that we did take out the portion that says, in the discussion of any issue, a teacher may express a personal opinion, but shall identify it as such and must not express such as an opinion for the purpose of persuading students to his or her viewpoint. We decided to strike that through and not include it at the special board meeting, but because the draft version didn't match up with what the public was seeing, I just wanted to make that note and make sure that that is what we're voting on, is not including the right for a teacher to express their personal opinion. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Just because it didn't match up. And then it says, controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by the students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of the classroom instruction and is not substantially disruptive to the educational setting. I know that there have been some heated discussions, especially in some of the government classes and things like that, where students will start to bring up something that's highly controversial. And I just wanted to know, in the administrative guidelines, would that be addressed in there? Because I've heard from some parents that it's not necessarily even coming from a teacher, it's other students, but they're being allowed to discuss those controversial issues. So I, was wondering if there's any administrative guideline that addresses that.
And we don't have the administrative guidelines fully developed yet, so that's
Okay.
obviously something that could be included if need be.
Okay.
in
I would
those
assume that
AGs.
this is talking about if it just kind of comes up as part, not as something in-depth conversation. And then I had a question from a parent asking if this policy would address any kind of flags in the classroom, pronoun buttons, things like that. Or would we still allow teachers to, if they so choose, to have any kind of flags or pronoun buttons or anything of that material?
I don't think the policy specifically addresses that at this point.
Okay. And I don't know if that would be something anyways that would be like a First Amendment right issue. So I don't feel confident adding anything in there without double checking with the attorney on that one. So I just want to make that point. And then, well, does anybody have any other things that they want to bring up so I don't take up the floor? Any other policies? I had a question on, I think it's 2520.02. Under, this is the library, the challenge process for the library or media materials, and it says under C, it says profanity or obscenity. It says virtually all material that is challenged belongs to one of three basic categories. And it says religion, it should be religion, ideology, or profanity, obscenity. Board policy regarding these areas is as follows. And then C, we removed of morality. So we removed when it says material shall be subjected to a test of literary merit and reality by the media specialist and teachers who will take into consideration their reading, public, and community standards of morality. So I'm just wondering why that was removed, and I don't remember that conversation.
Which number are you on?
Yeah.
It's under C, it's on policy 2520.02.
Did you say .02?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that as being removed.
See, I see it's struck through. The portion where it says of morality is struck through. I was just wondering what the reasoning for that was.
Under letter C, where it says profanity, obscenity, material shall be subjected to a test of literary merit and reality by the media specialist and teachers who will take into consideration their reading, public, and community standards. Is that?
Yeah, it says of morality after that it was struck out. Our old policy had it in there, and somebody decided to remove it. I was just wondering what the reasoning was for it being removed.
I don't remember seeing that in that, ever. 'Cause that was a section I looked at, and I don't remember seeing
It was
that.
in the Peppel and Wagoner ones that we had.
Oh, so what you're referring to is language that came out of the old policy manual transitioning into this one.
Yeah, we struck through of morality from that.
All right. Yeah,
Community standards, though.
Is it redundant? Is that the
Yeah,
reason?
that's what I think, community standards. What other things would be included in community standards? It's perhaps broader than morality because morality, again, is a very subjective topic. You know, there's a wide continuum of various beliefs, standards, all the rest. Some people have salty mouths, some people would never utter such a word, and you know, and everything in between, so.
yeah, because that was in the first policy reading too. I thought there was just some sort of change that was
So
made,
maybe
but
it
that
was
was from
just-
the old policy to this one.
Just redundant
Got it.
is what we're thinking? Okay. And then under that same policy, if you go down to the committee shall, and then C, weigh values and faults and form opinions based on the material as a whole rather than on passages and sections taken out of context. I take issue with that only because I do think that there could be a few pages from a book that make it wholly unacceptable for children. And I think that whoever's on the reviewing committee should have the right to have a vote against that book if they value what's in those few sections as being, you know, unacceptable, regardless of the rest of the book. That would be my concerns with that. And also, you know, to have an analogy, if you have a glass of water and 99% of it is pure and 1% of it is poison, you know, based on that 1%, you're not going to drink the water because it'll poison you. I think that teachers should have the same, teachers or whoever's in the committee, the reviewing committee, should have the same right to say no if there are a couple passages that they vehemently disagree with being appropriate for minors.
It's my understanding that the review committee, the process, mandates that the item being reviewed, everyone on the committee is responsible to read the item in its entirety prior to the meeting. So that would not be an option, and they may feel just as passionately that selection or those pages preclude including that book but they still have a responsibility to read it in its entirety, so it's not taken out of context. So I would not be comfortable with removing that expectation for a review committee to do that.
Which I'm fine with them reading it in the entirety. I think they would have to if they're,
Yeah,
going to
so
be
I
on
don't
the
know why we
committee.
wouldn't.
But I just don't like the verbiage of it saying, you can't weigh a passage and make your decision on the passage. As long as you've read the whole thing, you could, in my opinion, you could weigh that passage.
I think that's what it's saying, though, Ms. Payne.
Is that what we're,
I think it's saying that you shall like weigh value and faults and form opinions based on the material as a whole, rather than just reading this individual passage taken out of context.
Yeah, so I mean, the duty
So you could
is-
still, it doesn't preclude someone from saying the 1% poison is worthwhile getting rid of it. I
Right.
just had to have read the other 99% to be able
Yeah.
to judge that.
and this is one that we do have the administrative guidelines on? That were those emailed to us, those ones? Or was it, no, that was
I don't remember.
9130?
getting Administrative guidelines on this.
Yeah, I don't think we've got administrative guidelines for 02, for 252002 at this point.
Okay.
I think what we were trying to do is build all of that into policy, so we had that entire complaint process and review process laid out in policy as opposed to just in the administrative guidelines.
And the administrative guidelines, we don't have access to change, or they don't come across us at all, right?
Technically, they don't have to, but I think part of our process is going to be to have another work session when we get those administrative guidelines written so that you guys are able to see all of those, make any suggestions that you might want out of there before we enact them. But again, they don't need to be board approved. That way we can be a little bit more flexible and nimble and changing a practice quickly if need be,
Okay.
as long as it doesn't violate the policy itself.
Which that's my concern with not having access to the administrative guidelines is, for instance, that one policy that you and I exchanged emails about. The policy was correct, but the administrative guidelines for homeschooling was vastly incorrect. It had a lot of information there that's not required by law that could get us into a situation if we didn't update it. So I'm glad we updated it, but for things like that, it's hard to say, approve of. I'm worried without looking at those administrative guidelines that we could run into that issue with other policies. So I would like to see the administrative guidelines before they go live. So we will have access to see them before they go live. Is
We
that
could
right?
actually write an administrative guideline to have that.
I would like that, if we could do that. I think that would be helpful. I think that's all I had. Sorry. I was looking at the policies in the incorrect place, and I know Tom just found out today that we were supposed to look at them in a different area. Were you guys all looking at them in, what mode were you guys looking at them in?
That link that we had from Craig.
The Google Doc links? Okay. 'Cause
Yeah, so coming out of that board work session, I did send that Google Doc to the entire
Yeah.
board with all of those changes that were made. And those
It just
were all,
wasn't interactive because
those
it
were
would
all in the
violate
draft version that you guys had access to in board docs, but I know some of you were looking at the first reading manual still and didn't see those changes. But again, right after that board work session and that board update, we had the entire Google Doc with all of those changes that were made.
there were a couple other minor things, but I'll just email you those thoughts. They weren't any deal breakers, so.
And things that we potentially could address in the
Administrative
AGs
guidelines, or-
instead
yeah.
of just the
Yep.
policy.
Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Ms. Jessling.
Yes.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Legislative update. Legislative update now.
Next, yeah, next on the agenda. Legislative update,
No report.
Mrs. Briner.
She said there's no report tonight.
Didn't get it in time again.
No.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Student Achievement Report, Mrs. Cook.
I do. You can see it behind you here. The power of the clicker today. Okay. As promised, we were going to dive into our scores for science and the social studies curriculum, and then I also have some AP content. Again, this is to inform the board and to inform the community of how we did on our Ohio graduation tests. For fifth grade science, you can see on the left again, the left is our scores from 2019 to 2023. If you remember from last time, 2020 was a non-test year. And on the side of the right is the state scores, so you can see, as Mr. Heath kind of explained at the beginning, that sometimes we're looking at the trend of the state to see, was the test more difficult this year? You know, what are we going along with the same trend of the state? And you can see that we do definitely follow the same trend of the state. It looks like 2021 was trickier for students for whatever reason, maybe coming back from COVID. We haven't met pre-pandemic numbers yet, but we are rising and significantly higher than the state. This is 8th grade science numbers. 8th grade science, you could see we definitely had a dip in 2021 there that was even below the state, but we have come back strong. We're over our pre-pandemic numbers. So for 8th grade science, 75.7% of our students met proficiency. In biology, also doing strong with 2023, we had 80.6% of our students passing proficient level for our biology test. 61% of the state was at a proficient level. Also of note that I thought was interesting that the state level was in decline where we were not. We are not at pre-pandemic levels yet, but we are definitely coming back strong. These are our American government scores. This one I thought was interesting because we didn't change much. We're pretty consistent here. 77.6% of our students passed at a proficient level for the American government test, 69% of the state. For United States history, we did very well. We're almost at pre-pandemic numbers, 85.7% of our students proficient on the United States history test with 68% of the state. This graphic talks about our AP tests, and what you're seeing here in the red is the total number of students in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So we've stayed pretty consistent with our numbers of students that are just attending in those grades. The blue are total students taking at least one AP test. And what I learned from looking at the numbers was that 23 to 25% of our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade student body takes at least one AP test each year. So about a fourth of our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders are taking at least one test, and some of them take many more than that.
Mrs. Cook?
Yes.
Do we know how many students take College Credit Plus? That would be a similar kind of pursuit. I know there are differences between them, but those are students who are earning college credit.
That's a great question. I didn't ask for that data, but I can report on that next time.
I've got it.
Oh, somebody's got it.
We'll get on it for next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the reason that I didn't ask for that is because I was reporting on test scores. And with CCP, we do have, you know, how they did in the class, but we don't have there's not a test that they take. So there's not like a Ohio graduation test or a test that they take that goes with a score for the CCP. Advanced placement test performance, 79% of all our test takers scored a 3 or higher, which qualifies them for college credit. If you're not familiar with advanced placement test performance, when students take an advanced placement test after they complete the course, it is a cumulative exam or project, and they're rated on a 1 to 5. So if they earned a 1 or a 2, they wouldn't really be able to earn college credit. Now, colleges are subjective as far as what they accept as a college credit. Some colleges would only accept a 5 or 4, but 3 is the average. So 79% of all our test takers scored a 3 or higher. And then standouts, we had 100% of our AP chemistry students passed with a score of 3 or higher. And they averaged a 4, which is outstanding. 100% of our AP seminar students earned at least a 3 with an average of 4.0, and 100% of our AP drawing students earned at least a 3 with an average of 4.4. These are amazing scores. AP is very, very challenging.
Little shout out to Mrs. Kane in the art department because it's not typical that it's offered, and it gives kids another opportunity to excel.
Yes. Okay, and that concludes for tonight.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, quick update. We're a month into our fiscal year. Mr. Gatsky, you're not going to get paid. Looking at the first month of the year, comparing it to our May forecast, revenue is down by about $733,000, almost $734,000, and expenses are up per forecast by about $914,000, almost $915,000. So we're looking to be about 1.6 worse than we had projected in May, and I will explain that as we go through. So if we look at our current trend this past July, our actual revenue was down by $1.1 million. We got a little bit less than our tax reimbursement this year by about $500,000, and our investment income was down in July this year, and I'll explain why that was. Overall, again, $733,000, almost $734,000 less revenue. The majority of that comes into a couple buckets, 3 main buckets that it's coming into. First and foremost, I had projected that we'd have an advance out in June for about $200,000, which means that we would have had an advance in of $200,000. But as we closed out June, if you remember, we only advanced out a fraction of that. So I overestimated the advanced out, so that correspondingly has an advance in and an underinvestment in revenue. So it's not really a loss of revenue, it's just when we're trying to figure out how much we might have to advance out at the end of the fiscal year, sometimes we don't know. It's based on timing with regards to when we get cash from the state for our state and federal grants. The other portion of that was, if you remember in my June 23rd update, we had an investment that we bought above prime. So we paid more so that we had a higher interest rate, because when that investment was purchased, interest rates were extremely low. So if you pay a little bit more, you get a higher interest rate, which allowed us to have more interest earned over that time. We made money. However, when that investment comes due, we have to expense the cost of the investment plus prime, which made this month seem to be less revenue generated. However, when all is said and done, our projections will be correct. It's just this month was lower. So when you divide kind of what I project we make in revenue for investments over 12 months, it'll all pan out, it'll all wash out, but when you're looking at it at 1 month at a time, it seems like we've understated for the month. The other piece of the puzzle was when we coded in some receipts for state funding, we had coded them as career tech, as restricted funds. Some of that should have went to CARES, so we had to pay CARES back for some of that overstatement in funds that we got from the state. So that accounts for a reduction of about $300,000 in tuition payments being less than we had projected because we had to make a correction from June. So ultimately this will end up being timing and it will all work itself out when we receive funds that way. But it's not typical that we're under in our revenue. Usually we've been over, so wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. When we look at expenditures for the prior year, I saved us $13.2 million this last month. You're welcome. Actually, again, I didn't do anything. It's just timing. If you remember, we had the big transfer out last year to fund the capital improvement projects for the next 4 years. Obviously, we didn't have to make that transfer this year, so it looks like we saved $13.2 million. So that will be the common theme throughout the entire year. We'll see that we're always going to be down because this year was the next 3 years we won't be making those transfers out because we made them in one complete transfer. If you remember, you were all singing my praises last month because we were $1 million below, and I told you don't pat me on the back too much because of the fact that our buses didn't come in that we had ordered and were cash basis. So this is just a reminder that I saved us $999,000 last month, and I've lost us $914,000 this month. And again, it's not that I lost or saved, it's just a timing issue. Because those buses weren't paid for in last fiscal year, I have to assume that they are going to finally come in at some point in this fiscal year, so I had to move that expense to this fiscal year. So it's showing as the fact that we are going to be seeing an increase in expenses. But we saved it last year, so it's really a wash. So we're basically where we should be. We're about, expense-wise, we're actually spending almost to what we projected on $114 million, which is pretty good, but again, it's 1 month, so it's not really good trend data. So just wanted to share that with the board real quick. Overall, I think we're in a good spot. It'll work itself out as we go through the rest of the year, and obviously we will have our appropriations that have to be submitted for final appropriations to the Citizens Financial Advisory in the beginning of September, bring it to the board at the September, I believe it's the 12th meeting maybe, or whatever that Tuesday is, and then we will have an updated November forecast based on those appropriations that we approved. And again, the appropriations that we approved in June as temporaries will be pretty close to the appropriations that we will approve for final appropriations in September based on the way we've been budgeting. Happy to answer any questions.
Do you have this slide too that you were going to show us? Is that just for us?
I just keep it in there just in case I ever want to bring it out. Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Heath, I ask for the approval of B through F and addendums that may be acted upon in one motion.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll, Mr. Wade.
Ms. Jessling.
Yes.
Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
Motion's carried 5-0.
Oh, I hate this. I just
Unfinished business? I'll help you out. It's unfinished business.
Do we want to set a date for a work session?
Sure.
And I believe we have our regularly scheduled meeting with legal counsel tomorrow, so we can confirm a date, but if we can get maybe a couple on the calendar to share with him, that would probably be the best way to approach it. probably a couple weeks out here. So, no, it's the week of the 21st. I don't think anything's really happening that week, so. Except
going
maybe
on?
the first day of school.
2 weeks out?
Yeah, so do we want to look at the 21st, kind of afternoonish again?
Works for me.
If we're,
After like 3 o'clock.
yeah.
When do you start back, Maggie?
I will be back, so if we could be, I need to be at least at 4:35
4:30?
or 5 o'clock.
5
would-
o'clock.
Would be best.
What date?
So the 21st
21st?
is one option at 4:45.
I could do that.
4:45.
Craig, the only
Does
thing
that work?
The 21st?
The only thing to take into consideration is we did have some emails when we had the last special meeting from people who said, hey, people are working during the day, can you make it later? So could we do something like 5:30, because usually people get off work by 5?
Is this an executive session, or is this?
Or could we do executive session first at 4:45 and then after?
And then move into
So at least 5:30, yeah.
our special meeting at that point. So if we go 4:45 exec session,
21st or 22nd works.
looking, okay,
Which
so
day?
21st, 22nd is actually the first day of school.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
No.
Do we want to look at the 23rd?
I can't
Yeah.
the 23rd or the 24th. Not that you need me, but just letting the board know.
I'm okay on the 21st if that works.
I'm
for-
good with the 21st.
So let me bounce that off of our legal counsel tomorrow and see if we can get that one to stick. If it doesn't, I'll reach out to everyone, and
I'm happy to have a treasurer pro tem take the minutes of that meeting.
I'm sure you
So,
are.
don't feel that you need to not hold it on the 23rd or the 24th.
You're just trying to throw Mr. Vaccarello under the bus here.
Only because it is the night before school starts. Do you want to do that to yourself? I mean, we got a lot that week. Maybe we could.
Yeah,
The first
out
day
a
of school
week
is
or-
just fun for me, so
Yeah, but I think you're at the bus garage at like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Well,
so-
yeah.
I mean, what about the
week's
week
probably
of the
right.
28th? Would
Yeah.
that be possible?
Following week's bad.
Yeah.
following
Could-
week's bad.
Do you think we could do it next week? Is that, or too,
What about the 17th?
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 I could do that, same time?
Same time?
17th is good for me.
17th of
August.
August.
August. I can't do that one.
Not good for Ginny.
16th?
How about the
Going later
16th?
I can, but
16th is good for me.
16th?
16th
I can't do
that
the
week
16th.
is not so good for me.
Same, that week is a little,
A little rough.
yeah.
So if it could be maybe the week of the 28th
Not
as an
good for me.
alternative?
Yeah, I'm okay with that one.
Not
You
good
know?
with Mary.
That's not good for you?
For Mary.
Oh, not good for Mary. What about right after Labor Day then?
Like the 5th,
Yeah, I could do the 5th.
that's a week before our regular board meeting.
Week before the regular meeting then?
Mhm.
September 5th, another possibility?
5th
I
or
could
the
do that.
6th?
What
That's good
time
for
on the
me.
5th?
5th, 6th, or 7th?
We'd probably be looking at 4:45 for the exec session again.
Good for you?
It is. I hate to put it off that long, but
Well, I would prefer the 6th, but I could make back into town for the 5th.
Does the 6th work?
The 6th is
6th
better?
is good.
6th is
Sixth.
better for me.
Better?
That's better for me.
Okay,
actually.
let's go 6th instead of 5th then. So I'll
Sounds
ask
good.
about September 6th,
Yeah.
4:45 exec session.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Is that a second option or is that a primary option, just out
It's
of
a work
curiosity?
session, right?
Yeah, so we'll do exec session first with our legal counsel and then have a
Okay.
work session for the conversation. And
So is the 21st off?
Yeah.
we'll try the 6th first. If that doesn't work, maybe we'll toss out the 21st, the August 21st as a possibility.
Okay.
Like I said, I know it's the night or the day before the first day of school, but
And I could do the 7th, or that following week, I could do any of those days after our board meeting
7th work
We have Citizens Financial Advisory that day.
on the 7th.
Yeah.
on the 7th.
I could do the
And
13th,
again,
14th.
I don't need to be there, but Tom and Maggie.
Yeah,
need to be
Tom
with
and
me.
Maggie will be there, so that
That
doesn't
ain't
work.
happening.
Well, let's start with those 2 dates, the 6th and then potentially August 21st if the 6th doesn't work for legal, and then we'll go from there
The 21st?
Of August.
of August. So that'll give us a couple dates at least as a starting point and see what we can do. And I'll let you guys know.
So we're still back at August 21st.
So our first choice is going to be September 6th. If
First
that
choice.
doesn't work, I will check on August 21st. And if neither of those work, then I'll reach back out to the group.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Moving forward. On the agenda, hearing of the public.
Any new business?
New business?
New business.
Did we just do it?
That was old business.
I did
They're
unfinished.
unfinished.
Does anybody have?
New business.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, now we're ready for hearing of the public.
First, two speakers, Ann Anderson, Center Street, parent, guardian in the district, Susan Sednick, Little Mountain, resident in the district. Miss Anderson, I see Miss Sednick is here. Mr. Jewell, Hart Street, resident, will be after Miss Sednick.
Hello again. There's a few points that I would like to make, Mr. Tuttle. It's been implied by some of the board members that because some people do not send their kids to the Mentor Public Schools, that they don't have a right to say or have a say in what goes on here in our community with public schools. And I take strong issue with that. It doesn't matter where you decide to send your kids to, or if you even have children. If you're paying taxes and you're part of this community, you have every right to speak up. I don't fault Mrs. Cook because she's a teacher somewhere else, but she serves on this board. I don't have a problem with that. But I could make that an issue, but it would be ridiculous. And so I think that it's completely unfair and ignorant to make a comment about, well, your kids don't even go there. So I need to say that. I think that that's offensive. I guess what I don't understand is when we are talking about this sexually explicit material, it seems like, well, if we can't make a perfect law or make it just right, then we won't do anything. And we need to have a standard that is showing parents that, yeah, we have some standards here. We have some things that are right and wrong, and we're going to try to do our best by your kids, and they're going to be safe. I find it interesting that we are so afraid to tell male students, no, you can't use the women's room because you're a dude. We don't want to do that because that might hurt his feelings. But we don't care if we read garbage out of the bluest eye and there's, a 16-year-old girl who's maybe been a victim of abuse. It's like, oh, well, who cares? Who cares about her trauma? But we don't want to hurt that dude's feelings, even though he's got other options for the bathroom. I just want to say really quickly, well, whatever time I've got left, we have mission statements that you guys say you want to inspire students to reach their potential. You're going to provide a safe learning environment, and you are encouraging strong community partnerships. None of that we can see means a damn bit of difference to any of you. except Annie. We have a parental involvement statement that wants parental involvement, but we get involved and then people don't listen. The reason why there's been a book in that library since the 90s is because we trusted our teachers and we trusted you. We thought that when we sent our kids to school, there was safe material. Thank God for COVID, because we all woke up and saw the BS that's in school, and now we want it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo a lot of her thoughts. My question here tonight, who or what board or what administration decided to have these books in our libraries in the first place? And what gives you the right to decide whether they stay or not? You have a group of parents that are telling you that they don't want illicit, sexually explicit, illicit material pandered to their children. People get arrested for this every day. We just saw it in the news. People get arrested and put in jail for this every day. What's to keep you guys from having the same thing happen to you? I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know there's going to be more police charges or complaints with the police department filed. There's going to be lawyers consulted. There will be lawsuits coming. If this stuff is not cleaned up, it's got to be stopped. We don't want sexually explicit, lewd and indecent books. I don't care who wrote it. I don't care how long it's been in the libraries. I don't care if we compare it to Mr. Rogers or a book on witchcraft or not. These are illicit, sexually explicit books that we're giving kids the option to read. Are the teachers going to be pushing these on the kids? Because we're going to have a problem when that happens. Are you listening? Judging by tonight, I don't think you are. But I hope you wake up and realize what you're bringing on yourselves. Because it's not good. And it's not going to end well. It really isn't. I want to see that avoided. Get rid of the questionable books, and then we can move on. Stop going after our children. Are we pedophiles up here? Are we Are we going after our children? Who are we listening to? Who are you listening to that makes this sound like it's okay? Because it's not okay. I don't know any father that you would ask, hey, would you want your daughter reading The Bluest Eyes? I don't know of anybody that would say yes. I don't even know if you guys would say yes. But you're sure making it sound like it. That is unacceptable for a board of adults and a group of leaders that have been entrusted with kids' safety and child safety and the well-being of our school system. That is just inexcusable. You're going to be held to higher standards, or you're going to be removed. Some of you need to think about resigning, and resigning now, because big changes are coming.
Thank you.
Our next two speakers are Lauren Marchaza and Rose Iapolo. Iapolo. I did it again. I even had it here phonetically, Rose.
Good evening, everyone. Lauren Marchaza. I live at 7816 Oak Ridge Drive. I've got two students at the Mentor Schools, one at Hopkins, one at Memorial. First, I want to thank the board, specifically Mrs. Cook, Mr. Heath, for reporting out on the busing situation. With kids who take the bus daily throughout the school year, I was one of those parents shuffling around and getting emails just about every day about delays and kids sitting on buses for a lot longer than I think we really want them to. So thank you for reporting out on that. It's good to hear that some improvements being made. I'm still a little concerned that we don't have the subs that we need. It sounds like we have maybe half of what we need, which is not great. So in times of challenge, though, and when things are difficult, I do believe it's important to come to the microphone or the table with solutions or ideas. And so that's what I'm here to do tonight. So I did chat with some folks who are familiar with our transportation department, and the field of bus drivers, as we know, is pretty slim out there. It's really hard to attract and retain bus driving talent these days. So I took a look at, it looks like our substitute pay rate starts at about $17.50, which is actually not very competitive. I understand that our full-time rate is, which is great to hear. The substitute rate, not so much. So $17.50 an hour for subs. But when you look at like Willoughby Eastlake, it's $20 an hour. Riverside looks to be about $19.50 per hour. Chardon, 20-ish. Kirtland, $20.62 an hour. So you can see we're kind of on the lower end. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can maybe increase that hourly rate for our subs to attract more applicants for those positions. Because truly this makes Mentor one of the lower paying districts for subs in the region. So that could be why we're short. Some other ideas might include maybe a signing bonus. I know that Willoughby Eastlake is doing this for their full-time drivers, or when drivers have to double up or even triple up on their routes, because that did happen quite a bit last year. Perhaps we can provide extra pay for that. That might be an incentive. Drivers who train others, could we maybe give them some sort of award for that, or some sort of extra pay for that as well? So that's an idea. And then finally, an idea for training students actually to be better bus riders. We do have some challenges, as every school probably does, every district, with behavior on the bus. So perhaps somehow providing some training for our kids, whether in orientation or maybe even the safety programs that we have in June, that could actually bring more drivers to our school when we have better students who will be on their buses. Just some ideas, wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Iapolo.
You got that right.
2 out of 3 tonight.
Rose, I promise we've been working with them on this.
I'm gonna spell it out phonetically next time.
It is actually on my screen, and I still said it wrong.
That's okay. Okay, so I didn't necessarily know if I was going to speak. I wanted to see kind of some of the things that went on. So everything I have are just bullet points and concerns of what I heard tonight. It was mentioned that explicit materials it's kind of something that you can, it's up in the air and it's up into interpretation, and I say explicit material based on the definition that you all agreed on is pretty specifically defined. If you think that fellatio, cunnilingus, bestiality is not considered porn, then I don't want to know what you do consider porn. There are no litter boxes, yes, everybody had a good laugh on that. But there are students who wear ears and even pin a cat or dog tail to their backside and walk around school. So it's not impossible for parents to hear a rumor that there's litter boxes and think, that couldn't be too far away. So while I didn't participate in those rumors, I certainly would not be surprised when I heard somebody say that. Mr. Heath, I'm wondering what the school law is specifically that you're speaking of regarding to transgender students using whatever bathroom they please. So if you could cite that law that you were talking about. The Attorney General's recent opinion does suggest otherwise. Mrs. Briner made a suggestion and a scenario as to how to handle the explicit material. So here's how I think that scenario would go if put into real life with kids. Boy A's mom approves an explicit book and with graphic pics and content. Boy B's parents opt out. Boy A takes pics of book and shares on social media or in text to Boy B. Parent of Boy B sues the school. It's not realistic to think that just being able to opt out is going to keep that explicit material from getting spread around to everybody else, and that's our big concern.
I think an opt-in is more realistic and more manageable, and you can't underestimate. I know a lot of your kids are not, you didn't raise kids in the era of social media and phones, and it's pretty sneaky what these kids can do and get away with. So I ask when you sit down with your attorney that you really look into some of those things, because I know that if I opt out and my daughter sees a picture in some of these graphic books, you will be hearing from a lawyer. So I don't think that's why put the district at risk when it's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay Wall and Rosemary Masterson. Lindsay's a Beechwood Drive parent guardian, and Rosemary lives on Hart Street and is a resident of the district. So then I believe you're up, Ms. Masterson.
So I've heard a lot on the side of reason and balance, and a lot of other opinions as well. Off script, I think to suggest that our children are only exposed to material that comes through the school is absurd. Everybody's got the internet, everybody's got phones, everybody has access to each other, so eliminating material from availability in the schools changes nothing. I think as parents, teachers, and leaders of education, it's imperative that we foster a broad environment of learning that helps our students grow into strong-minded, independent, thinking adults who can observe and rationally assess the happenings of the world they walk through every day. We can't just choose to learn what we want to know, but rather what we should know. So the good, the bad, the uncomfortable, the truth of who we are, of our history, of the world we are in. We should be equipping students with the ability to analyze and evaluate various ideas and concepts presented in books. By banning books in school and limiting curriculum content, we are sheltering them from difficult, uncomfortable, or controversial topics that are an essential part of the human experience. Shielding them from these realities denies them the opportunity to grow intellectually and emotionally, and ultimately stifles their ability to engage with the world around them. We need to trust the innate intellect of our youth and their ability to develop into discerning adults, not to infantilize them and curate the content of education. Every day we see evidence in our world of a backward slide toward racism, sexism, and an utterly unequal view of human worth. There is truth in the adage, if we don't learn from history, we are destined to repeat it. The students of today will become the leaders of tomorrow, and I believe it is our responsibility to expand their experience, not hamstring it. We have the ability to help our children grow into exemplary, productive adults if we can trust the open exchange and dialogue that comes from an expansive and honest education. I encourage this school board to rise to the highest good of educating our students through inclusion, diversity, respect, and truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next two speakers are Sage McMillan from Danbury Court, parent guardian, and Jacqueline McCormick from Ridgeview Trail, resident in the district. I don't think either one are here. So then we have Lynn Mazika from Clifford Court, who is a resident, and we have Paula Bielfeldt from Hart Street, who's also a resident.
Mr. President, member of the board, members of the board, Mr. Heath, Mr. Wade, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Earlier this summer, I mentioned the problem Pine Gate was having with the drop-off and pickup for Orchard Hollow, being on Arrowwood Drive in Pine Gate. The administration promised to move it out of Pine Gate. I want to give you a follow-up. Here's a portion of a post in the Pine Gate website. Good news coming to you. There will be no Orchard Hollow pickup traffic this year through Pine Gate. I just spoke with the superintendent, and he assured me a letter is going out Monday explaining the new process. And sure enough, the letter was sent out explaining the new procedure. I'm sure you can't see this, but here's a map of the new procedure, and it's all in and out of Hendricks and nothing through Pine Gate. And as a resident of Pine Gate and as a person who has been watching this, I thank you heartily. I thank you. This is a good thing. You've solved a dangerous situation and you respected the residents of Pine Gate. I attended today's special meeting at 4:45 regarding the board's federal funds budget plans for FY24. The total amount received was $701,303.98. It is ludicrous to call this a drop in the bucket, as was mentioned by a board member. What programs would have to be cut or eliminated if we lost this money by violating Title IX guidelines? We know that most of our money comes, school money comes from property taxes, but this money is also certainly needed. It would not be good stewardship, it's getting late, of the school's income to risk this money by violating federal policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate, Mr. Hammond, through the Assistant Superintendent's office, has done a wonderful job working on that Orchard Hollow solution. So thank you to Tim.
Mr. President, can I clarify something real quick? Ms. Mazzico was referring to, that was just the Title 1A amount, the $701,000. The total amount that we reviewed tonight was $4.6 million, which is only a portion of the federal money that we received because that's what we're obligated to present out annually for the IDEA money. We actually received almost $7.5 million last year in total federal funding. So it's about a little bit, zero more. So that is zero. We're just missing a zero. So just to make sure, I just like to make sure that we have the factual information. But you were right in that number. That was part of what we presented. But we do receive about $7.5 million in federal monies in one shape, way, or form.
I'm glad it's that correct.
My name is Paula, and I'm a 56-year resident of Mentor. My son is a recent graduate of Mentor High. Get closer. Oh, get closer. I'm new to all this. I should have spoken in the beginning. The one thing I would like to say is I do see you listening. I do see you trying hard. You are in an untenable position of striking a balance. So thank you. I appreciate everybody up there. Today I stand before you to address 3 issues that strike at the core of education and intellectual freedom: book banning in schools, critical race theory in curriculum, LGBTQ+ in the high school community. At the last board meeting, several individuals stood before the board saying they would not support a school levy based on the inclusion of these items in our schools. First, banning books. As an advocate for knowledge, critical thinking, and the pursuit of truth, I firmly believe banning books is a detrimental and regressive practice. The second issue was CRT, and many stood before this board advocating for its exclusion. At its core, CRT encourages us to acknowledge and confront uncomfortable truths about the pervasive nature of racism throughout history. Are students so weak-minded and fragile that they need to hear a fanciful whitewash history? Tell the truth, talk about it, learn from it. Finally, at the last board meeting, many spoke out against LGBTQ and fostering an inclusive environment. Embracing this community is not only good, it is necessary. It allows us to break down prejudices and creates a nurturing environment where all students can thrive. Last meeting, some invoked the name of Jesus Christ. I would like to think if Jesus were in high school today, he would be among the LGBT community, exemplifying the Christian tenets of generosity, compassion, and love. These 3 issues all have common themes: inclusion, acceptance, and empathy. If we deny students access to these, we deprive them of their chance to develop, we narrow their worldview, and we reinforce ignorance and prejudice, which I believe are the very items a conservative agenda is advancing in the name of protecting children. I say to those who seek to ban books, bury history, and exclude others, you will not succeed. While darkness and denialism can hide much, they erase nothing. I say to the school board, do not let the tail wag the dog. There is a small but sadly loud group in our city who represent exclusion, ignorance, and prejudice. Please continue to encourage open dialogue between students, parents, and teachers. These discussions provide guidance while representing intellectual freedom, or respecting intellectual freedom and autonomy of each student. Let us foster civility, understanding, critical thinking, and ultimately the empowerment of our student. Thank you. I'm a little nervous, so that's why my voice is shaking.
Thank you. You did good. Very good.
Our last speaker is Brady Anderson from Center Street. Okay, so that concludes the public participation section of the agenda. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Ms. Payne?
Yes.
Ms. Jessling?
Yes.
Ms. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Motion carries at 5-0. Meeting is adjourned at 8:41 p.m.